Assalamu alaikum, folks. Inna alhamdulillah wa kafah. Wa salatu wa salamu ala rasulih al-Mustafa. Wa ala ibadi alladhina irtada. Wa man bihudahum ihtada. Wa bi athari ahli al-Madinah iqtafa. Wa ba'd. Fasalamu Allahi ala al-qawm. People, we have an amazing, esteemed guest tonight. Somebody incredibly distinguished, an expert in his field of physics. Somebody who leads and is the director of a quantum research center in Canada, Dr. Mir Faizal. I'm just bringing his page right in here. Allahu Akbar. Allah. Assalamu alaikum, Dr. Mir Faizal. Welcome to MindTrap, and shukran for coming on tonight, taking your valuable time out.
So pleasure. It's really nice talking to you. We've been doing that for some time now before going on.
All right, people, those of you that are not familiar with Dr. Mir, he has published over 100 publications in reputable journals. Sorry, 150. 150.
150. You just deleted 50.
Sorry, I almost deleted 50% there. I mean, more than 50% since the 150. Right, so
like around 1/3.
I apologize. 150 in publications in reputable journals for physics globally throughout the world. Some breathtaking kind of theories, some research that is challenging, that is consolidating, that is just amazing, and we've got him on tonight. Also, what we would really like to look at as well is Dr. Mir believes that much of quantum, or certain aspects of quantum physics, does extend to arguing for the existence of God, and we'll speak about that, and also some of the challenges of quantum physics, or specifically quantum gravity. We'll take a look at that, and how can this tie into our understanding of the Quran, and by extension our lives as human beings. So, Dr. Mir, all right, I'm just going to just give a quick shout to all the people watching on YouTube and Facebook. I'm just checking that there are no issues with, I always do an audio check to make sure that there's no issues. If there are, we'll just rectify them now. So if the moderators can just, if they're awake, that is at this time. Right, just making sure that the sound's coming through fine. Right, somebody's saying, right, okay, I think on YouTube it is, and I'm just checking on Facebook now that the sound is coming through fine. Okay, cool. I take it it's fine. Right, so Doc, take it away. Tell us a bit about yourself, a bit of your background, just so, because people won't be familiar, may not be familiar with you.
That's something I don't enjoy talking about, because I believe in looking at ideas, not people, but just a bit.
Come on,
my
after
doctoral-
this, you're gonna have a huge fan club, so they
Yeah,
need to
just
know
a
a bit
bit.
about you.
So people who I do. So my PhD was, of course, on universe at the time of Big Bang. I worked on something called pre-Big Bang cosmology, universe before Big Bang. I worked on parallel universes. I do quantum gravity, and in principle, I would describe myself as a quantum gravity perennialist, in the sense that I have worked on string theory, but I don't stick to string theory. I worked on loop quantum gravity. I worked on different aspects of quantum gravity. I won't say I've done groundbreaking work in anything, but everything, like the many different aspects of gravity. My interest is that I work on many of these theories. Try to see what is common between them, because that way we might get to learn something interesting, rather than sticking to this as my theory. I don't want to look at anything else. Mufti was telling me that he was a bit surprised to hear this, but it is true that we have that attitude sometimes developing in science, especially in quantum gravity. String theorists don't want to look at anything else. People doing loop quantum gravity don't want to look at anything else but their field. People doing different things want to just look at their field. So I kind of even borrow techniques from one to another. Apply this idea is good here, I take it and apply it there. This idea is good here, I take it and apply it there. So I'm pretty open when it comes to quantum gravity. I do work string theory, but I would not classify myself as a hardcore string theory.
Okay, you see, to a lot of people, this is way, just over their kind of pay grade. Quantum physics. Is this something you've always been interested
Quantum
in?
physics, apart from measurement theory, quantum physics is simple, but quantum gravity is the big question.
Okay. Uh,
Yeah.
okay, well, I mean, isn't there the quote, anybody who claims they've understood quantum physics hasn't understood quantum...
That, apart from measurement theory, nobody understands. We know how it works. We don't know why
Hmm.
it works. Like there is this
Ah,
big
right,
problem
okay.
in quantum mechanics in terms of measurement theory. We don't understand them. We don't understand the foundations. But if you assume those foundations to be true, we know how to calculate stuff. But when it comes to quantum gravity, we have we have started having patched understanding of what quantum gravity should give us. But then this boils down to what we will be discussing today, because there is at least something we have learned, I think we will get to that. So what have we really learned in quantum gravity? Is there anything that we have actually learned from all these different aspects of quantum gravity? And I think there is, like, there are two results which seem to be true independent of which approach to quantum gravity that you're taking. One is that the entropy, there's a quantity called entropy. The entropy of a black hole, at least to its first order, like the leading order correction, is just given by the area of that black hole divided by 4. Now this result is produced from, no matter what approach to quantum gravity you're taking, you will get you will be able to produce this black hole entropy back. But
You're saying
another
there's
really,
you're saying there's consistency with that in understanding the entropy of black holes. Is that what we're saying?
yes,
Okay.
no, the specific formula that the entropy, like the lead, there is corrections to this formula, of course, which come from
Okay.
quantum gravity. But the first order term for the entropy of a black hole is the area divided by 4. Now this result is almost universal. This
Okay.
comes up
People,
as a
area divided by force. You got it.
gives you that the entropy of a black hole. You have corrections which come in after that as logarithmic corrections. The coefficient of it is a subject of debate and possibly model dependent. But yeah, let's come to something more interesting for me. The other interesting aspect of quantum gravity, that's again a universal aspect of quantum gravity, almost a model independent aspect of quantum gravity, is the existence of a minimal length, a cutoff in geometry of space and time. You see, if you take string theory, strings are the smallest structure, the fundamental structure that you have. You can't probe universe below string length scale, and there are more stronger arguments to be made from something called T-duality. I won't get into that; that will become technical. But then, so no matter what approach to quantum gravity you get, what you
Yeah.
would really be getting is that space and time has a natural built-in cutoff. You
Okay.
can't have space and time below a certain scale. Space and time is an emergent theory, much like the
Space.
geometry of
Are
your
you saying
scale.
space is an emergent property?
Space
Is this what
and
we're saying?
time, space and time, both.
Because time, I
There's
could
like
understand that people would say
even
time is by mass.
space. There's not fundamental. There's not. I mean, space time is just another coordinate to space-time continuum in
Yeah.
relativity. So hard to make that distinction, but at such a fundamental level. But space and time and everything we see around us is an
Hmm.
emergent structure. It emerges from something non-space, non-time. Uh, Quantum gravity deals with this non-space, non-time structure. The question is what this non-time, non-space structure is depends on what model of quantum gravity you're doing. But statement about space and time being non-fundamental is a model independent state.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. This is, you know what this is? This is how, if you want to be reminded how dumb you are, then you have a conversation with Dr. Mir because you're trying to think, यार ये कह क्या रहे हैं यार कुछ I'm sure it's English but
Okay,
no, yeah,
let me make it simple. I thought I made it already
no, no,
simple enough, but
no.
let me further. Let me simplify it further. Let's bring it down further. Look, you have a table in front of you, possibly, right?
I
It's made up
do.
of atoms.
Okay, yes, it is. Yep, I
Now,
can
and
not see that, but yeah.
like, there's a certain geometrical structure, right? To it.
Okay.
Your table has a geometrical structure to it, right? It's
Of
flat.
course.
It's flat on the side, flat top, and then there are then it's curved on the side. So it's a geometry.
Hmm.
Uh, you could talk of half the table. You could split the table and talk half the table. It still has a geometry. 1/4 the table, it still has a geometry. 1/10 the table, it still has a geometry. But the table, the geometry of table is not a fundamental reality, because it's an emergent structure which emerges from atomic physics, right?
Sure. Hmm.
So go to half atomic length scale, the table exists no more, and it becomes meaningless to talk of geometry.
Okay, okay, I get what you're saying here. So you're saying if you see, even if we cut the table in half, we've still got an atomic structure that represents the table. But if we cut the atomic property in half, then we haven't really
Yeah.
got the essence.
No, what I'm saying is something
Huh?
even simpler. Like when you
Cha
cut
cha
the
cha
table
cha.
into half, sorry about it. When we
No,
cut
no.
the table into half, two parts of the table, and both of them still have a geometry, right? They have a geometrical structure.
Right, of course, yeah.
But if you keep cutting and you come to interatomic scales, now if you cut these two atoms apart, there is no question of a geometry there.
Okay, fair enough.
Geometry breaks. And the break of geometry occurs because geometry was not a fundamental truth, it was an emergent truth.
Okay.
So universe, all the space structure of space and time that we know of is not fundamental, cannot be fundamental. There are a lot of problems with that. It's an emergent thing, and what we know of using these different approaches to quantum gravity. I'm not speaking just confining myself to one approach, which is almost a universal statement about different approaches to quantum gravity that we can make. Is that this structure of space and time should break down at more, at least at a very small length called Planck length. It's really really
Planck length.
small.
Isn't
Uh,
that's okay, yeah. That's the smallest possible length, isn't it, in a
length
quantum unit in
cannot
a
have
quantum.
I mean, some of my work actually was about this, that can you have lengths bigger than Planck length? And if so, how would your experiments bound them? That has been a work, that has been some work going on. And then I did something about Planck time also, because if you want to have Planck length, you have to have Planck time. And then, but basically, you cannot there is a minimum structure to the geometry of space and time,
Okay.
at which you have Planck time, Planck length, this minimum structure at that, and below that you have nothing. Like you can't have half Planck length, half Planck time. These things, especially half Planck length, in the sense that these things won't exist. It's not that you can't measure them; they simply don't exist. Just like your table does not exist at half atomic distances, because the geometry of space and time is an emergent structure. It's not fundamental. That's it. Simple.
Yeah, yeah, bilkul. I mean, in essence, it's like saying 99.999% of everything we see doesn't really exist.
It's like
But
saying
it's
everything we see, 100% of everything we see is an emergent reality. The fundamental
I
fundamental.
exaggerated that point
I know
1%.
you're
I
talking about it
exaggerated.
might be going on dark matter, dark energy side, but I'm just saying this is more fundamental. This is we're not talking of particular particle, particular nature of certain particles or something. We're talking of geometry of space and time, and everything exists in space and time. Therefore, everything by definition is it's emergent. It's not unreal, but emergent. Just like your table is emergent, just like many structures in the universe you see are emergent.
So you're
But there's
distinguishing between unreal and emergent. Okay.
oh
Interesting.
yeah,
Interesting.
there's something called renormalization group flow or effective field theories, which is a nice philosophy we have developed in physics, which says that you don't need to know relativity if you want to just build buildings. Newton's physics is enough, and relativity will exactly predict Newton's physics at that scale. The deviations from Newton's physics will be deviations from relativity will be so small that you might very well neglect them. So at a certain energy scale, you do not, for most phenomena, need to know what happens at an energy much higher energy scales. And
Basically,
this
people just stay in your lane. That's what Dr. Mead is saying, that just because basically you're dumb enough to you're so dumb you don't understand this, the universe will still carry on despite your dumbness.
Let's
No, I'm joking.
integrate those of freedom. You have to throw those like those degrees of freedom will not be relevant. Like if you calculate by relativity and you get such a small correction that your measurement, like your it's beyond what your capacity to measure. So why would you raise
Hmm.
about? So so these approximate. So this is and this statement, by the way, is formalized in this thing called effective field theory. But then again, we were discussing something really nicely into how this all fits with the existence of God. I think
Okay.
that might be very interesting to your audience.
Sure,
We
of
could
course.
also
I mean,
start.
why? A very brief question before we get into that is what. I mean, it may seem absolutely silly, but why is this important? This quantum gravity. Why is that important?
Okay, it has no technological uses. It
Okay.
answers the questions about the fun. Like, let me be honest. I don't know if people
Yeah,
sometimes would say this and
be
that,
honest. Yeah, we love
but
honesty
honestly,
on this show. We love it.
the energy scales we are dealing with, it's very hard to even think of ways to test it, let alone use it. So there is no technological use to it. It's just purely knowledge for the sake of knowledge. So we can understand the universe at the beginning of universe. We can understand the fundamental aspects of space and time. We can understand fundamental objects in universe like black holes, and we can understand the very nature of reality in a better way. But really, realistically, I don't think it can have it. At least I don't think it would be hard to think of a technological use. You can learn things from it which can have some technological use. That's a different matter. Like a lot of the mathematics developed in string theory and in quantum gravity could have applications, for example, for graphene sheets. That's a different matter. I actually wrote a paper on that.
Hmm.
How graphene can be used to simulate
I think I
simulate
think
quantum
Doctor,
gravity.
as many TV series as I've watched, you've written as many papers. It's amazing. Wow.
But yeah, realistically, no. Realistically, I think to be really honest, not to
Uh,
get into
I love
sometimes
honesty.
scientists
I
would
love
not
it.
say that directly, but I will be honest, it can't have any possible technological use.
So okay, but it's incredibly. I mean, for most people, it's mind baffling. Just to also just a little question, just for the audience as well. I'll pretend I already know it, but to make sure people may be asking a question when you say quantum gravity. Are you speaking about a gravity that is different from normal gravity?
Okay, so normal grav again, going back to emergent theories, you see, you for anything when you're talking of mechanics, are
I
you
obviously
speaking?
know, but this is for you guys.
Yeah. So let me simplify it. So when you're talking of one part, when you're speaking about Newton's laws, are you talking about something different from quantum mechanics? Well, in a way, yes. In a way, no. I mean, in the sense that at the energy scale at which Newton's laws are valid, you could get the same result from quantum mechanics, but it would just give you so small a correction that why you would see the reason why to bother. Now, why are you doing those calculations? So when we're talking of classical general relativity is a good theory and it explains universe fairly accurately, even though there are now we have seen there are yeah, there are suggestions that it should get corrected if you don't take dark matter. I've been working on that again on modified theories of gravity to correct Einstein's general theory of relativity so we can explain dark matter without need of dark matter. But anyway, if you leave those problems aside, let's
Hmm.
just stick to the simplest model. You have Einstein's theory of relativity, which explains gravity as a curvature of space and time. There are two
Hmm.
more candidates which scientifically are equivalently good. It could also have been a torsion of space and time, or it could have been a theory of break of metricity. But just because historically Einstein's theory dominated, so let's just stick to Einstein's theory. I won't
Yeah.
deviate.
No, I meant like so people generally the standard
Like,
kind of model within
yeah.
physics
So,
you're gonna have the
so
four forces. Is this
yeah. So when
different
you're
from that force?
no, that's what I'm saying. The four forces. When we are taking Einstein's theory of relativity, we
Mhm.
are talking of a classical
Yeah.
theory. The other theories, we have a quantum theory for them. We don't even have a quantum theory for something called perturbative quantum gravity, in which you would just take a small perturbation of Einstein's theory, a small change in the geometry of space and time, and try to quantize that.
The
That has a
the
problem.
the
That is a problem
gravitons. The
with realizability.
gravitons.
Yeah, yeah. Even the theory of gravity. Even the theory of gravity.
You guys think
Some,
I don't know?
something as simple as a graviton, we can't even quantize that properly. I mean, that's like the simplest you could do. You could take a fixed background
Oh,
in space and time and just perturb it a bit and try to quantize that. You're not even able to do that. You get into something called non-renormalizability. The idea is that when you're doing any other quantum field theory, you get infinities. Infinities pop up. But then there's a nice way to deal with these infinities. You just throw those infinities away in a nice way into fundamental constants of the theory. You can't do that with gravity. The new infinities keep popping up, and the theory cannot predict anything beyond the energy scale at which it has been tested. So this theory is called a non-normalizable theory. So and this is just when you're taking space and time as fixed and just making small change in it, you can't even develop a quantum theory of that. What you can do is you can do classical physics of that. So in regimes where quantum effects can be neglected, general relativity gives a fairly accurate result. So, again, going back to that, just like quantum mechanics would reduce to Newtonian mechanics for a single particle, whatever our true theory of quantum gravity is should reduce to Einstein's theory of relativity at scales at which Einstein's theory of relativity has been tested.
Wow. Wow. Amazingly said. So, okay. So, I'm sure you all absolutely understood that. And if not, then you need to do some more research, you Juhal. Right. So,
If you get difficult, if you think I'm making any point more complicated.
यार you know what it is, Dr. साहब, जाहिल लोग आ जाते हैं कहीं कुछ आता ही नहीं इनको. Right, so okay, so we've got quantum, which basically it's a more up to higher spec version of gravity. Okay, so now
gravity describes space and time. Quantum theory describes what would be actual, like, but this is an emergent theory. Quantum theory would describe from what space and time would emerge from the real theory. So if you
right,
like,
okay, so the actual essence from which it's emerging.
I always like this analogy. Let me give you this analogy to understand.
Give us an analogy, absolutely.
And this is like one of my favorites. Take what shall I take? Take a spoon, take a pen, and bend it. Force is proportional to bending. That's conventional Hooke's law. You bend it, you put more force, more bending, more force, more bending, more force, more bending. Keep bending it. At a certain stage, the pen breaks. Now, if you're simulating it on a computer, a small amount of force after this would give you an infinite amount of bending. Now, you would not think that this is a real thing in nature. You would think that the law that I was having before this, force proportional to bending, was an emergent law which emerged because of atomic physics. And at the place where this pen broke or this spoon broke, this law no longer holds. And it does not hold because this was not the most fundamental law for the universe, that force is proportional to bending. It was an emergent law.
Okay.
In the same way, and this infinity that you would get is actually called a singularity. In your equations, you would actually get a singularity.
Okay.
Now, when you do general relativity, it kind of describes universe fairly nicely at most energy scales. There are certain problems. Generally, it's a good description of our universe. But it completely fails at the very center of black holes and at the beginning of universe. You get a singularity. You get infinity. Now,
why? Sorry, just to be, if it can be said quickly, that is, when you said at the beginning of the universe it collapses. Why? Why so at the beginning of the universe?
Just from your equations, just from you draw you get your Einstein's field equations, plug the solutions at the beginning of the universe, you get a singularity, and at the center, it's a mathematical thing. At the center of the black holes, you get a singularity.
Makes
so
absolute sense.
So the idea is, this is the whole idea, this singularity, and then there are Hawking-Penrose theorems which show that the singularity is not just a random artifact of your solutions. It's actually built into general relativity that these singularities should occur. So you can't just deal away with them. But the important thing is what these singularities should really indicate, or what these singularities really indicate, is that general relativity is an approximation to some true theory of quantum gravity, some true theory of nature. Just like Hooke's law broke down when the pen broke, general relativity breaks down at the beginning of universe and at the center of black holes, because those points really cannot be described using space and time. The space-time approximation to nature breaks down.
Okay, that makes
Space-time
sense.
is not a good description of nature at those points. We need to describe, and just like atomic physics is more fundamental than Hooke's law, this quantum theory of gravity, whatever it be, string theory, loop quantum gravity, or whatever, it would be more fundamental than the space-time description of nature.
Fair enough.
So that's the best analogy I can give.
Sure. So now, okay, having this field, this vast knowledge, with you. How do you link this in to the existence of God? Because you have found yourself being drawn closer, ever so closer, to the, if I can use the term, certainty, or having reinforced your faith through quantum physics, especially through quantum gravity, whereas one would assume, the public generally assume, that as people become more and more enveloped in science, they become more distanced from God. We're intrigued by this, Doc. What's this about then?
Okay, I think that's a nice thing, but let's start again with basics. Like
Oh,
let's clarify
basics.
the definition. Then that way we know, all of us know what we are
Absolutely,
talking about.
absolutely, absolutely. Because we need to obviously explain to people that these, you guys wouldn't know anything if we don't explain it to you. No, so
That's a nice way to approach. So when
of
we're
course.
talking about existence of God, I think you see now let's look at this question. Does God exist? This question is a bit ambiguous, and
Okay.
the ambiguity in this question can cause potential problems, and I'll tell you why. Because you're merging two questions together: the
Okay.
question of existence and the definition of God.
Mm-hmm.
And there are so many definitions of God that some of them are mutually inconsistent with each other. So if one of those definitions is true, then other one of them by definition can be false. So this question is
Mm-hmm.
really ambiguous. You
Of
might
course,
run
of
yourself
course.
into infinite loop. You might prove one God, and then somebody might one definition of God, I would say, and then somebody would come up and say that this has a problem, this definition has a problem, and you would run into an infinite loop. No, I will modify this definition here. And there's a related problem in physics. It's called gauge fixing. You see, there's a strong theorem in physics that when you have unphysical degrees of freedom, your theories can develop inconsistency.
Okay.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think I think it would be nice. I mean, I will be trying to work this out in a more formal logical structure, but it would be nice to do that. That I think this is true, that if you have lot of degrees of freedom, you can play around with it, then you can possibly get into inconsistencies. And this happens in some, in at least all the forces that we know of it, that when we try to quantize them, not all the degrees of freedom in those forces are physical, and these unphysical degrees of freedom lead to inconsistencies unless we do something called gauge fixing. So we need to fix a gauge, we need to fix certain definitions before we can do anything with them. The definitions we fix, there can be arbitrariness, a little bit of arbitrariness in that. We fix certain definitions, and then we know, we kind of understand what we are dealing with.
Okay. Okay. Sure. Sure.
So here we also have a similar problem. We have, I think, a lot of unphysical degrees of freedom when we are talking. So let's try to gauge fix this problem. We have a problem of existence and a problem of definition. So let's fix the gauge, fix the problem to a problem of existence, and then we can only argue about definition, and then it will become a
Okay.
more meaningful.
The existence
So
of God, just to be clear, the existence of God we're talking about.
Yeah, so I would define the existence of God this way. Listen to my definition nicely to everyone there. So
Sure.
my definition of God would be as the most fundamental of aspect of reality, as the most fundamental of aspect of reality, which by definition cannot not exist, and from and everything that exists follows from this, and it does not follow from anything else more fundamental. If it does, then that more fundamental thing is God, and this is an emergent. So the most fundamental aspect of
Hmm.
reality, I would call it God. I'm not giving new information, because if it was a
Is
hardcore
this
90,
is this similar in some ways to what people like Tilak call the ground of being, and maybe some Muslim theologians have used the term wajibul wujud, that which is necessity for
it
being.
does of that.
Okay.
Yes. It is something of that sort. But even in a scientific terminology, this definition would hold. Yes,
Okay.
it's nice that you brought Wahdatul Wujud up, because I wanted to bring it at the end of it. But let's follow the discussion. Uh,
Ah, you naughty, naughty.
So, so, so I'm not, but by the way, giving you new information. This is just a tautology. This is just a fixing of definitions. Because a materialist could come up and say, well, that's fine, and matter is the most fundamental aspect of reality. And that's a 19th century materialist. Anybody who does not even quantum gravity, anybody who has not done quantum field theory in curved space time could say matter is the most fundamental aspect of reality. But so anybody, like everybody and almost anybody can fit with this definition. I don't think
Mhm.
there's a problem with this definition, that you would assume reality to some certain realities to be more emergent than some other realities, and then you would define the most fundamental aspect of that reality as God. This is not giving new information, because even materialism fits in this definition of God. It's just making the problem more dealable. You can now deal with this
Yeah.
problem in a non-ambiguous way, because now the question, does God exist, has shifted, has been gauge fixed to the question, what is the most fundamental aspect of reality? Now this is a more easy, this is an easier question to deal with. You see, you fixed by definition the question of existence. You said, well, for me, God is the most fundamental aspect of existence. Now I have to only deal with what that most fundamental aspect of existence is.
Yeah.
So this is so this is exactly like we do in physics. You gauge fix your definitions, and now we know what we are talking about. Otherwise, it becomes really difficult to sometimes know what we are talking about. It might even happen that atheists and theists will have to overlap. Some might have some overlapping views, and then it becomes really confusing, because each time you're defining something and then proving it, and it becomes an infinite loop. So people don't know what they're talking about. So let's start with this. So the question of the question, does God exist, actually, after gauge fixing the problem of, like, gauge fixing existence by definition, by tautological definition, has reduced to the problem of has reduced to this question, that what is the most fundamental aspect of existence. So now we're really dealing with a very, very precise question, that what is the most fundamental aspect of existence. So now let's go. Now we get back to this discussion on quantum gravity. Actually, we should have had this before, and then we could have had the
Sure.
discussion on
No,
quantum
no.
gravity.
It's
But
just the nature of this conversation is also like in the quantum world, it just pops up anywhere. We can't really be self-certain.
yes.
Right. So
So now we, like I said, that space and time, surely, I mean, a 19th century materialist would say particles are the most fundamental aspect of reality. You don't even need quantum gravity. If you do quantum field theory in curved space time, particle, the description of universe in terms of particle is not a good description in many. Even if so your space time is a fixed classical structure, but your fields are quantum on it. And in certain quantum, like in certain kind of space times, you cannot, I mean, it would not be better to describe universe in terms of particles. So materialism is gone pretty early on.
mhm.
But then what are we left with? We are left, at least in if you're just doing quantum field theory in curved space time, you would be left with certain algebraic structures and an underlying space and time. But by the time you come into quantum gravity, you realize that space and time itself has to be quantized. It doesn't matter whether you're taking string theory or loop quantum gravity or Wheeler-DeWitt approach or Euclidean quantum gravity or causal set approach. There are many different approaches to quantum gravity. It doesn't matter. You
Learn
you come to
Siko Jailo, Siko.
you come to this realization that space-time cannot be fundamental.
Okay.
And there is this philosophy which has come up because of this. It's a scientific statement, but also a philosophical statement, in this sense that bit is not from it, but it is from bit. It means substance, bit means information. So information is not from substance, but substance is from information. The laws of physics are more fundamental than physics. The laws governing this universe are more fundamental than the universe. The universe does not, the laws don't exist because of the universe. The universe or the multiverse exists because of these laws.
That's
This is
incredibly fascinating because if information is at the source and central to everything and it precedes matter itself, then information by its very essence is something that is coded to be decoded and therefore suggests intentionality, suggests design, suggests all these things, doesn't it?
we can even make that argument a little more formal, because let's come to this, that space time has a yeah, let's be formal and nice so that there are no loopholes left in the argument.
That's a good point.
uh,
Good
uh,
point.
so, so so we come to this thing that universe, I mean, this can be given the existence of singularities at the center of black holes at Big Bang is enough to see that universe space-time cannot be the fundamental structure. It's an emergent structure, and no matter what approach to quantum gravity we take, universe seems to have an inbuilt like the space and time has this breakdown structure. It breaks down at a certain scale, and so it emerges from some pre-time, pre-space structure, which is a purely information theoretical structure, which is a purely, if you would like, an axiomatic mathematical structure, which is just a logical structure. So substance that you see around you is an illusion. More fundamental than that is mathematics. You fundamentally, it's just a mathematical structure. Now, when you come to, and that's, so far it's physics. Now let's see
But
what are the implications. Yeah, go on.
I was just going to say, but isn't the problem there, or were you thinking of bringing that up anyway? The problem there that the mathematics themselves can't be justified by themselves. Is that the Gödel's theorem thing?
That's exactly here. That is the problem. You see, then we come to the problem that now we have the most fundamental structure of the universe is essentially a mathematical structure. At least, can that be a fundamental structure in itself, containing all its consistencies and containing all its descriptions, if you like?
This is almost like the journey of Descartes, but at a kind of more a deeper level, isn't it?
So let's follow this argument. So can that happen? It's interesting, but I'll try to again simplify because it gets a bit abstract here. Not that abstract. I'll try to simplify, and Mufti will help me do that.
I'm here for your assistance, Doc.
Thank you. The problem is you can't. And why can't you do that? The reason for that is simple, because apparently, as it turns out, there are two theorems in mathematics, very fundamental theorems, which have shaken the foundations of mathematics, and they are called Gödel's theorems. So Gödel's theorem number one states...
Gödel's theorem, people, yep.
Yeah, so Gödel's theorem number one states that given any axiomatic structure, you see, in mathematics, what do you start? You start from some statements you know from intuition, or you can guess them to be true. They can't be proved to be true. They're axioms, and everything else is proved using that axiomatic structure. So given any, the bare minimum, like you would think that given some simple mathematical structure like number theory, you can at least describe all properties of numbers using an axiomatic structure. At least that's what Hilbert wanted. But what Gödel actually demonstrated was that given any axiomatic structure, there will be certain properties properties in that structure. If those axioms are true, then there will be certain properties which will be true, but which cannot be proved to be true.
So just to simplify this for people, what we're saying is that for us, the way we understand maths, we understand several things as a given. Like we just know, and a simple, like an example of an axiom, like you said, like two parallel lines can't meet, or there's whatever, there's structures that we understand from maths inherently. Now, those kind of rules that are unwritten within our minds can't themselves be justified. Like we can't. This is what we're saying, isn't it? This is Gödel's.
No, we're saying something simple, like something simpler.
Simpler than that, even.
Yeah. So what we're saying,
you know what it is, Zada, I go towards the more complicated things. You know, it's ये छोटे-मोटे simple चीजें जो है ना, they don't suit me.
So it's basically given any axiomatic structure. So take any set of rules which you presume to be true. Then there are certain things which in that system, for example, you can have an axiomatic structure. You can have certain axioms which can give you number theory. Then there are certain statements in number theory which are true but cannot be proved to be true. Very important.
Is there an example of what yours?
Simplest example would be what? Like even in language, you would have things like, I mean, the formal examples would be more complicated, but simple examples would be like a statement. This statement, which is true, cannot be proved to be true using that other statement. And that other statement would state that this statement is true.
Okay.
So,
I'm not sure
statement, okay, statement cannot be proved to be true using this statement cannot be proved to be true.
Okay.
So if it is false, then this statement is, this statement which is true cannot be proved to be true. If it is false, then this statement is wrong. But if it's true, then it can never be proved to be true.
Right. Okay. Because there's nothing inherent in it to verify.
No algorithm. You can't run a machine learning process. You can't learn you cannot run it on a computer. Infinite time to prove it.
And,
there's
and
no algorithm.
Okay. And is this also
Number one. this
Okay.
is pretty straightforward. Just take
Yeah.
it like this. Let's put a simplified version of it. That if you have certain rules, some things can you cannot derive all the properties. Or mathematics works on certain rules, geometry works on certain rules, number theory works on certain rules. You There are certain property when you specify those rules. Certain properties necessarily are true, but they cannot be proved to be true
Yeah,
using those
I'm
rules.
with you. I'm with you. So, I mean, couldn't this by extension be extended to other things like within that are generally in philosophy like a priori arguments that there's certain
I think
things
it
we
has.
know to be a
Oh yeah.
priori.
Oh yeah, no, axiomatic structure by in itself has been generalized a lot, but this Gödel's theorem has had implications in computer science. It has had huge implications, I think, in
Hmm.
philosophy. It has had huge implications everywhere. Yes, it can have huge implications. I mean,
Yeah.
whenever you it's like two wow moments in a scientist's life is at least personally I would say are when you understand quantum measurement and when you understand Gödel's theorem.
Vah,
So when
vah,
you
vah,
understand that
vah.
you can't understand quantum measurement, to be more precise, you understand that you understand what is actually what is there about quantum measurement that is so hard to understand, and then when you understand Gödel's theorem.
Amazing.
So these are two wow moments when you're like, oh my god, like what is happening here? That's like those shocking moments in one's life.
Okay,
The
so
first
yeah.
theorem is that big a shocker, but the second theorem is so. Second theorem says one of those things which cannot be proved to be true is the consistency of that structure. So
Hmm.
to do mathematics, the bare minimum requirement that you have is a
And
consistent structure. You
and
see,
what
because
and what we mean by that, just to simplify, is that this will always yield this result.
no, this will you cannot prove a thing and its opposite.
Yeah,
It's
and that it will always
you cannot
even if it does do it now, but will it always continue to do this?
you cannot use one set of rules and arrive at, for example, a statement like x is true and use a different set of rules, different approach using the same set of rules and arrive at x is false. This would not make sense then because if you do this, if you allow that, then there is something called what it's called like some kind of explosion you have that you can prove anything.
A
It's
bit
like
like the brains right now, everybody trying to make sense. A bit like
yes. So, so so Gödel's theorem number one states that you have certain things in any axiomatic structure that you cannot do. People might think then, okay, it's okay, we will just add that as another axiom. You can, but then you will still be left with things that you cannot do. You can add that other thing when you will still be left with things that you cannot do, and this will go infinitum. The other problem that you would have is that this basically would mean that, and the second thing is that one of those things that you cannot do is the consistency of that structure.
Hmm. Okay.
You see,
Okay.
one of the things that you cannot actually prove is the fact that this structure is consistent, which is like the bare minimum requirement to have a mathematical structure.
Of course, of course. Hmm.
So, but then the question is, how are we humans even in any case able to know these Gödelian statements? We are able to know it through our understanding, not through an algorithm. This is Roger Penrose's
Hmm.
argument. And I would even extend it a bit more that the very fact that we start with certain axiomatic statements, we know these axiomatic statements through some kind of intuitive understanding rather than an algorithm.
Yeah. Is this not
And
what is generally the response, that this is a kind of like an intuitive knowledge, as opposed to what they sometimes call in Arabic the fil badhi, the kind of badihiyat that people tend to, like in the
yeah,
past they argued like, how do you know the whole is greater than the the sum of it than its part? Like they say that even a child that hasn't learnt anything would know things like this, that this is intuitive knowledge, like a priori as opposed to posteriori knowledge.
yes, there are, and that in other words, you can start from some axiomatic structures. But
Mhm.
the important thing to realize here is that you can start from different axiomatic structures. So you
Okay.
can have lots of different axiomatic structures, and they can give you different results, and that's fine. But at least they would give you consistent results.
ठीक है.
But
Tick. You all
the
understand that now.
yeah. So to simplify, so you would always have statements that cannot be proved to be true, but we as humans know them to be true. And Roger Penrose actually makes this argument that there is something non-algorithmic about our consciousness because of which this happens. But I would even extend the argument to say that at least even the existence of axiomatic structures by themselves are something we have never, how do we even come up with an axiomatic structure? Is this understanding? There's not an it's not possible to even think of an algorithm to produce these axiomatic structures, just because algorithms work on these axiomatic structures. These axiomatic structures cannot be derived from them, and certainly their consistency cannot be derived from anything else. From those, it can be derived from a bigger set. You can so you can take a bigger set, prove the consistency here, but then you can't prove its own consistency here.
So what are
So
you saying? Where are we getting these from? This is the follow. Is this
yeah,
the direction?
and the idea is that our consciousness somehow works in a non-algorithmic way
Hmm.
to generate these axioms, and the fact that we can know that
Isn't
these
that also
statements.
what Sir Roger Penrose is
Yeah, yeah,
arguing?
yeah.
That he's arguing
Yeah,
this.
it's exactly what he's arguing. But
Hmm.
he's applying it to human mind. I just take it one step further and I say, well, humans do mathematics, but why we know universe is mathematics. So the only way to prove these Gödelian statements are true is a non-algorithmic human consciousness. So the only way to know that these statements are true in any case would be what would be this would require consciousness at the at the most fundamental level. So from it to bit, but for the consistency of bit consciousness. This would be my argument. And
It's
since I
all about
define God,
the bit and the it, people. The bit and the
yeah,
it.
and since I define God by definition as the most fundamental aspect of reality, then by definition, the most fundamental aspect of reality, this is now just tautologically equating them, is
Okay.
consciousness. So the most
Okay.
fundamental aspect of reality is consciousness. And this consciousness we define as God. Because see, when we're saying
This
God
is
exists,
the supreme consciousness, or this is not. You're not equating that with human consciousness.
no, 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 I'm not. I'm not. I'm not. I'm just borrowing the fact that humans can do mathematics and thereby require consciousness as a non-algorithmic process, an argument of Penrose, and applying this argument to the fact that universe fundamentally is mathematics and thereby for its own consistency would require consciousness. As
And an
so this
argument
is
here, maybe
yeah.
you want to say this later on, is that some physicists that have argued that the universe is mathematical when you look at it, when you look at the structures, the laws, the forces,
Mathematics is mathematics.
is mathematics. Sorry, it is
It is,
mathematics.
yeah.
They've
Universe
said
is
that this. They've
mathematics is more fundamental.
sure. So they've said that this uh, leans towards, or it demonstrates, or reflects to them that perhaps it is. If it is like that, maybe it is just a kind of like a simulation or a hologram, because that's what you'd expect to see if it was mathematics, which it is.
Yeah, there's this problem of brain in a box. We'll come to that. That's my
Sure.
second argument, a
Okay.
more simplified argument. So this is so this was a bit abstract because sometimes people might find it hard to understand it. So the second argument, which is a watered down version of this first argument.
Well,
Uh,
now it's for all of you to start listening. The
yeah,
watered down
maybe
version.
online later on you can separate the two arguments. You can put the second argument, the simple argument for the existence of God, and the really, because I don't think this formal argument, because also you see what formally we have demonstrated. Formally, what we have demonstrated in that argument is that you, you know universe as we see is an apparency. Something more fundamental than this apparency is information, and something more fundamental than information is consciousness. And so everything we see is an emergent phenomena from consciousness. This goes back to Wahdatul Wajud. That
Okay.
Wahdatul Wajud, sometimes people misunderstand it as pantheism. It does not mean that everything is God. It means nothing except God exists. There's a big
Okay.
difference between the two. It does
Nothing
not
except God exists.
exist.
Okay. This is
So this is a
Wahdatul
big
Wujud
difference.
in essence.
Yeah, it does not mean everything is God. It means nothing except God exists. The real existence is only that of God. Everything else is an emergent.
Okay, how is that distinguished from everything is God then? How do you
Everything
distinguish the two?
everything is God in string because you are equating the most fundamental aspect of reality to an emergent phenomenon. It's completely different. Everything is, you see, the fact is that everything you see does not even it does not have a real existence. The real existence is that of God. It's like this table does not have a real existence. The real existence is that of atomic physics. Atomic physics doesn't have a real existence. The real existence is that of a particle physics. Particle physics doesn't have a real existence. The real existence is that of possible, if string theory is true, of strings. But string theory doesn't have a real
would you say this is monism?
Monistic philosophy. But I would say it's similar to Adi Shankaracharya's definition of Brahman.
Okay, yeah,
Definitely.
okay.
Yeah, definitely. With Advaita Vedanta, or you can take it in terms of Advaita Vedanta, you can take it as Brahman. In terms of Wahdatul Wujud, as you can take it as, as the Wahdatul Wujud definition of Allah, or if you want to say it in a Christian context, you would equate it with God the Father, the ultimate reality from which everything else proceeds. But that's a separate discussion altogether. See, when in Christianity, I said God the Father, because Christian theology, we can have a separate discussion on Christianity one day. But
Sure.
let's come.
Because Professor Dr. Mir has a whole discussion on Christian concept of God and how it's sometimes often misunderstood. But yeah.
And how it's properly, correctly represented in Quran, if you like. But let's come to this. Let's come to our basic discussion here. So let's come to the simplified version of this argument. What would be a simplified?
That's what everybody's been sitting here waiting. Yeah, this simplified version, Kabaika.
So this initial argument, if you like, Hindu Vedanta terminology was from Brahma, and now I will argue for Ishwar. And then I will argue for the, if we have time, we can discuss.
How are you distinguishing between Brahma and Ishwar?
Oh, the Brahman. In Advaita Vedanta, Brahman is this ultimate reality that cannot be described.
Yeah, the ultimate that cannot. Yeah, Brahman. Yeah.
Is the linguistic human reflection of that ultimate reality. So the idea is that when this ultimate reality reflects on finite human mind, it appears as Ishwar. So Ishwar is a linguistic approximation of Brahman, a linguistic psychological approximation.
Sorry, say that again. Sorry, say that part again.
So it's very interesting. Let's go on to the simpler argument, and then
sure. Because I have seen with I've read up in the past where they've said things like Brahman, and you've got Paramatma, and you've got there's a triple kind of perspective of how.
I think one of the nice profound things. I mean, I always say, if you want to see where you can find a really good profound philosophy, I'm not talking of scripture philosophy, you would possibly find it in Hinduism, and where you can find the most strange, most stupid ideas, you can again find it in Hinduism. Sorry to be offensive, but it's like this amalgamation of the seeds.
An ultimate contradiction.
No, it's like it's a civilization. It's a long civilization.
Yeah, of course.
It has had its development. So we sadly classify it as a religion. But Hinduism, again, we'll discuss Hinduism next time. Let's come to this.
Let's come back.
So coming back, let's take the naive creationist argument. I think creationists are not cases because evolution is obviously true. I mean, anybody who does not think evolution is true is either totally ignorant or is lying, or I mean, in present day, I don't blame people of past because they did not have this knowledge.
Yeah.
But anybody living today who doubts the theory of evolution is either insane, or he's totally ignorant, or he's a liar. I don't see any other possibility.
Or sometimes they are manipulated and conditioned to believe, and they lack a personal kind of depth. Yeah, ignorant. Fair enough.
Yeah. So that's what I said: ignorant, insane, or liar.
Right.
In evolution, there's no debate. There's a debate in scientific community about evolution. Does not even understand ABC of science. But so creationist for me. Nutcases, complete nutcases. Evolution is true. I always say this: evolution is true, and it's trivially true. You don't even need to argue for it. I mean, it's like it's as true as the house being built out of bricks slowly, not suddenly emerging out of as a spontaneous creation. House, that doesn't happen in nature. House is built slowly, and complex life can only evolve from simple life. Which can evolve slowly through abiogenesis from non-living matter. But let's come to this thing. Let's come to this simple creationist argument of design that they like to make. So the argument they make is that look at I, it's really complex, and it would require some amount of intelligence. Mm.
Mhm.
And then people come up and you can rightly come up and say that this can easily be explained through process of evolution. But even I like to formalize everything so that we know what we are talking about. Otherwise, it
That's
becomes just vague.
that's the best thing. That's the best thing that you do, Darky. The way you're formalizing it. This is how it's going to be helpful to so many people.
Yeah, so at least we know what we are talking about. Otherwise, we don't even know what we are talking about. So so what does this design, what does this thing really mean? So I'll tell you what it would mean. What we are really saying is this: because when we're dealing again with God, or when we're dealing with atheism, God is supposed to have infinite intelligence and atheism is supposed to have zero intelligence. Like in atheistic view of nature, nature is supposed to have a zero intelligence, or reality behind nature is supposed to have zero intelligence. When you're dealing with zeros and infinities, things become complicated. Human mind is not
Hmm.
equipped to deal with especially infinity and even zero in many cases. So let's assume that we're
Wow.
dealing with finite
Wow. I've
intelligence.
never. That's amazingly said, actually, because I never really. The infinity thing I've always grasped. I mean, I've always known, and people, the human mind isn't designed to deal with infinity. But zero, that's an interesting one. I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued. That's wow.
Zero and infinity, 1/0 is equal to infinity. It's the inverse of it. It's like if you zero and infinity, they're the same. But
Wow.
and they're both numbers. That's all. I always keep stressing infinity is just a number.
Okay.
So let's
Okay.
come to this. So let's assume let's assume for the sake of argument this universe is simulated, because that will even
Okay.
remove some of the preconceived notions. And now we can ask let's ask the question formally. What could you say about aliens which can simulate an eye? Well, you would not say they're stupid, you would say they're clever. So they have high
Definitely.
intelligence, not low intelligence, more close to infinity than close to zero. What would you say about aliens which can simulate an evolutionary process leading to the formation of I? You would
Mhm.
say they're really, really clever. What could you say of aliens which can simulate a universe with right laws of chemistry leading to the formation of an right laws, right conditions on certain planets, which would lead to the formation of I? Hyper intelligent. What would you say of aliens which can simulate from simple theories complete universes in which right laws of chemistry would develop, in which right laws of physics would develop, which would simulate an eye? Hyper intelligent. What would you say of aliens which could write a program which would codify a fundamental law of physics in such a way that this would develop into a multiverse? Many of these universes would have
Yep.
right laws of chemistry, which would have right laws of biology, which could lead to the right laws of evolution forming an eye.
They are
Extremely intelligent.
incredibly intelligent.
This
Absolutely. Yep.
what I need, light upon light, not light upon darkness.
Allah. Nurun
Mufti,
ala
like
nur. Allah.
Noorun
Allah.
ala noor. The design of eye is not reduced by evolution; it is enhanced by evolution. Evolution is not reduced by chemistry; it is enhanced by chemistry. Chemistry is not reduced by physics; it's enhanced. It's Noorun ala noor, and the source of all that noor is Allah. Like, can you repeat
يهدي
that verse
الله
if you remember?
نور على
That's a
نور أن يهدي الله
yeah,
لنوره من يشاء. Allah guides to his light whom he wills.
Allah's light. I mean, it's a very beautiful verse. Do you remember it?
That
Uh,
الله نور السماوات والأرض. The whole.
yeah, mithlahum. Then the
Oh,
similitude of his
that's
nur.
right.
Yeah,
Yep.
that one.
Right. Okay. Well. Yep. فمثل
Maybe,
نوره. Let me bring it up. Right. So I don't
yeah,
misread it.
yeah,
But yeah.
yeah. So get that verse, because I think that's really appropriate here. You will understand. When you look at that verse in this context, you can see the beauty of.
Of
You can
course.
see the.
So. Yep. That's people. الله أكبر. الله نور السماوات والأرض مثل نوره كمشكاة فيها مصباح. That it is like a mishkat. A mishkat is something which a kind of like an indent that people would put lamps in, like into a wall, or they would put something. Misbah al misbah fiha zujaja. That this lamp has in it, and this is obviously going back to how they designed lamps back then, that this has within it a kind of glass or a bottle or a container. And الزجاجة كأنها كوكب دري يوقد من شجرة مباركة, that this glass lamp is as though it is a kind of like a planetary, although it's like a cosmic planet. Allah is saying yuqadu, that has been set aflame, min shajaratin mubarakatin zaytuna, that from an olive branch, that la sharqiyatun wa la gharbiya, it is neither of the west nor of the east, yakadu zaytuhu yudi, that it's the kind of fuel in this lamp seems to almost come alight, walau lam tamsashu nar, even if it has not been put alight by fire. That is the power of this kind of fuel. That nurun ala nur, yahdillahu li nurihi man yasha, wa yadribu Allahu al-amthala lin-nas wallahu bi kulli shay'in alim. That this is light upon light, and Allah guides to His light whom He wills, and He sets examples or parables for people, if only to understand. But Allah has knowledge above all things. That's yep.
This is such a beautiful verse. This is such a beautiful verse, because if you see, what is happening is that light is being reflected. First initial reflection, secondary reflection, and then the light is there. Like the light is there even if it's not a place, even if nobody is noticing it. God is always there. But what we are really viewing is God, like the emergent realities, the reflected realities. We are seeing the structure of I. But the structure of I is not, it's not nur and then there is zulumat and it's out of spontaneous creation. There is a bigger reflection, and that is the theory of evolution. And then there is a bigger reflection, which is the laws of physics. And there is a bigger reflection, which is the it. And then there is a bigger reflection, and it all, and the source of all these reflections is God.
Wow.
And God is light. Is light upon light. If you see, universe is just light upon light, structure upon structure. There is no inconsistency. There is no lack of structure. The problem with naive creationist argument is that they assume a structure and then they assume darkness. You don't see darkness. There's light upon light. Evolution is another light of God. It is the hand of God through which design comes up.
Professor, that is so amazingly said there. I have to say, wow, that was so articulated with great profundity, honestly, and it really hit a mark. That's amazing, subhanallah.
And then let's come to this thing. You see, you were asking me again now. So this would be the second thing. So now we have one problem. So before somebody can make, there's only one flaw left in this argument. Somebody could say, well, maybe our universe is simulated by aliens.
Okay.
So we have to deal with that one problem. But apart from that, it's very clear that the logic behind this universe, if it were a simulation, it would be stupid to say that these aliens were stupid or zero intelligence, because I don't even know what zero intelligence could produce. Randomness, complete randomness. But it's more like the structure represents infinite intelligence rather than zero intelligence. But what if this universe is simulated by aliens? So what? If this universe A is simulated by aliens, the argument just shifts to universe B, where these aliens are situated. If the universe B is also simulated, then the argument just shifts to universe C. And even if there are infinite number of them, so what? Infinity is just a number. You can map infinity into 0 and 1. There are that many numbers between 0 and infinity as there are between 0 and 1. I can have a 1-to-1 map, and still we will be left with the same argument. Infinity is just a number, just another number. So it doesn't change anything.
People, there you go. But here, Professor, the question would be that people could ask, and they do ask, that, look, if you're saying that this has to go back to the ground of being is God, then, it goes back to God, then what does God go back to? Is that not part of this same process?
So see, what I said was, that's why my definition of God was as the most fundamental aspect of reality, which by definition does not exist, and everything else exists because of that. So again, the same argument. You can have a circular loop. If God is not the most if the God we have defined as so God G1, if you have defined as the most fundamental aspect of reality, it turns out that's not the most fundamental aspect of reality. It just doesn't change the argument. It just shifts to another. You'll run the whole loop. You just get to another God, and you can get an infinite regression of God. That's fine. You would still end up with a maximal element, because infinity is just a number. You can have a 1-to-1 map between that.
And I think that is how the
would represent our structure, and one as a limiting case would represent God, and that's fine. You can have infinite regress. Doesn't change anything.
And I was going to say, I think that is because classic many Muslim theologians did use this argument of saying Allah, one of his attributes, how they defined God in the books of theology, was that he is wajib al-wujud, that he is the
Yeah.
fundamental essence of being. And I believe
Arabic.
personally that people like Paul Tillich and other people later on in the 20th century, they took this maybe from the Muslim argument saying that the ground of being. Now, because if God is the fundamental, because if you juxtapose that with the Aristotelian kind of causation, it's going back to causes. It's in some way different because it's a bit more linear. So people are saying, well, okay, I mean, it's still linked, but here it's from this things are emerging. It's not like
Yes.
it's not like
So
kind of
it's not.
something like a dominoes effect that God is the
Yes.
necessary. Yeah.
Yes, yes, I don't like that argument of first cause. And actually, if you read about, if you Google my name, you might get, you might conclude that I'm an atheist. Some Christians are somehow writing that I'm an atheist, and they try to rebuke my ideas without even trying to understand what I'm saying. The reason is because I have argued strongly that we should have a physical basis for Big Bang. When I was asked, does God did God create the universe, or was it created through Big Bang? My standard response has been God made universe through Big Bang, and God has done this.
What's this?
Everything is done by God, and
Oh,
there is no
okay.
difference between Big Bang and what I just did.
What
Everything is
you
done by
mean
God.
like drinking tea? You mean in the
Yeah,
in the everyday?
this is done by God. I lifted this, I dropped it, this is done by God. God is the most fundamental aspect of reality. But the real
Mm.
question is that, you see, this is important since now you brought it
You see,
up,
but
which
then
I
that's
which is
going
very
to bring questions like, which I know we want to clarify this point that we're making, but that's going to bring questions of free will into the argument. That if you're
Yes.
saying, well,
So
you know,
we'll come to free will,
yeah,
because I have a nice take on free will. We can come to that, but
sure, sure,
uh,
sure.
we can come to those arguments. But let me first
But yeah,
clarify this
this
particular.
Big Bang is
Yeah.
yeah,
So
materialistic explanations for it. You're saying
physical. I won't use the
physical.
word materialistic because
Okay.
matter is not fundamental. Physical, consistent interpretation. Because see what Quran. This is something very beautiful, and it works on the minds of some scientists as we're doing science. That we don't believe there are inconsistencies in nature. If you believe there are inconsistencies in nature, then science is dead. But
Hmm.
uh, but then why do we believe that there are, like, let me make this argument nicely. Why do we believe that there are no inconsistencies in nature? Mufti, my charge is going low. What shall we do?
Have you got a
Should I try
charger?
to charge?
Have you got a charger close by?
I've got a charge. My charger is not near where I'm sitting.
I tell you what. Do you
uh
want to go get your charger and I'll just have a few words with the people until you bring it back? That's
yeah, let's
absolutely
do that, and then we will go back to this. And after I get my charger, I also want to talk about what we were talking of before. I want to make this distinction between Ishwar and Brahman clear, because
sure.
that will fit a lot into these
Absolutely,
things that
go
you
for it.
think. Okay.
All right. So, people's MindTrap. All right. So you like my graphics, peoples? Right. So, what is going on, people? What is going on? Ravens see each other in different colors. Odin, God exists. I Nas. So for some reason today, the Facebook comments don't seem to be they don't seem to be coming through. I don't know what kind of a flaw is going on. So I'm blinded about what my Facebook gente are saying, but I can see the YouTube lot. Right, so this is definitely very fascinating, and the reason I wanted to get Professor Dr. Mir on the show is because this, despite it being incredibly profound and complex, but these are arguments that really do that they can. I mean, if you do understand them, or you can even relate to part of it, it can shape so much of your understanding of this world. So, right, I feel that a professor is, yep, just He'll be back with us shortly. So I do. And by the way, when you're stuck on certain things here, do go away and research them on your own as well. And remember, the best learning takes place as proactive personal learning. That just Google questions, Google subsequent questions. Just let it go down a rabbit hole of learning, and that's how one can really amass so much knowledge. Professor, I'm un momento. Welcome back. All right, are we good to go?
You're back. Hopefully, it will charge my phone nicely. So, before we get into these questions of free will and determinism, I want to clarify something, because this is something what makes a big confusion. Like, this creates confusion. There's a difference between the two. There's a difference between God
Mm-hmm.
and linguistic identification of God. This is very, very different. So there
Okay.
is one thing,
What
which is
does
the
that mean
ultimate
for
reality.
people wondering?
So there is one thing is that there is God ontologically and ultimate reality. And second thing is that we are trying to describe that reality in language. By definition, this description, or at least by Quranic definition, this description cannot be accurate. Because Quran says no vision can comprehend him, but his comprehension is over all visions. So any linguistic approximation of divine is only an approximation. And my personal interpretation to verses like Alif Lam Mim, which do not have grammatical meaning, yeah, I call it a self-correcting code for Quran, in the sense that it is a correction against fundamentalism. That don't take language, don't absolutize the language. It will get you nowhere.
What do you
It
call
is
that? A
an
self-correcting code.
Yeah, so in computer science we have something called self-correcting code. So I call it a self-correcting code against fundamentalism, because you can these verses don't have meaning in grammar.
Mm-hmm.
So they don't have generally meaning in terms of in terms of fixed meaning, but they are not having a meaning, has a deeper meaning. And the idea is that even Quran is only a linguistic approximation of the divine. Don't absolutize this linguistic approximation and make it into an idol of divine. Take it as a
Ah,
linguistic approximation. And I'll tell you how beautifully Quran actually talks about it. It says, "Laisali mitlika shay wa huwa samiun basir." There is nothing
mhm.
like him.
Yeah.
There is no mythal of him. There is no similitude of him, and he's
That
samiun
that
basir.
verse for people laysa kamithli shay wa huwa sami al basir is Allah explaining that there is nothing like unto God, yet He sees and hears all.
Here's all. Now look, let's analyze this verse in detail. What's happening here? Language works by mythal. Language works by similitude.
Hmm.
Because that's how we have evolved to use language. We have evolved to make similitudes of things, and that's how linguistic structures work. God, because God, language cannot comprehend God, and there is no similitude of God. Yet, then the second part of the verse says that He is hearing and seeing. Let's even understanding this word hearing and seeing a little more. What is hearing? Sound waves enter your ear, and your information content of the external world goes up. Light waves enter your eyes, and your information content of the external world goes up. It is impossible for God's information content to go up, because He already has perfect information. So, what do we really mean when we are saying He is
Ah,
hearing and seeing?
that is
What
once
does this
again.
mean?
This is on some level these things are common sense on some level, but you just never think of them in that way. Like what you've just said now. Now when I'm thinking about it, I'm reprocessing it on many levels. It's kind of common sense, but I've just never thought of it like that.
Yeah,
Amazing! Wow! Wow!
what,
Wow! Wow!
what
Yeah.
it really means? What it really means is this thing. You see, God, for example, God's perfect knowledge is something so perfect that you can't even describe even God's knowledge, let alone God's being. And you cannot psychologically relate to God. But when you're praying to God, when you're remembering God, you imagine God to be seeing you. You see, when you're doing something, you imagine God to be seeing you. When you are praying to God, you imagine God to be hearing you. And this is your psychological aid. You see, this is your psychological aid. This is all the attributes of God mentioned in Quran are your psychological aid to relate to the divine. Ultimately, divine is beyond description in
This is
language. And that
basically
is why
your journey to God and not God's journey to you.
your approximation to divine, this
Hmm.
is the best approximation you can do, because how can you otherwise relate to to an existence which is perfect in knowledge and so absolute that is so transcendental that there's no way you can psychologically absolute relate to it. So what you do is you take human attributes that we have developed through process of evolution, and you project its absolutization on God. This definition of God as a attribute, as a perfection of your, your psychological aids and the human attributes that we associate with certain virtues, is called Ishwar in Hindu terminology. So this is the thing.
Just
And
just to repeat that, just okay.
so this rather this being, this idea of God, that we, when we approximate God in language, this psychological aid that we are using is called as Ishwar
Ishwar.
in Hindu
Okay. Yeah.
terminology.
Yeah.
And this idea of God as Laisali Mithlika Shai, who is beyond any description, where there is no myth on to God, is what is called Brahman. So
Yeah,
this is interesting.
I had that's what I had kind of read, and I've read another definition as well, that when it's to do with the kind of cosmos and just being in terms of the cosmos, it's Paramatma.
Yeah,
Is that?
it's not like cosmos, because again, with the problem that universe is not that fundamental.
Hmm.
but but then this is, now let's come to this idea. So we made a very big distinction between God as the ultimate reality, which cannot be described in language, and as linguistic approximation to God in language.
Yeah. And from the from the Islamic, so for those of you that are, just to clarify for you, when you've got the ultimate, when Allah is speaking, saying "Laysa kamithlihi shay'un wa huwa samiul basir," you've got that pure, the absolute, the categorical, divine, which is then incomprehensible. So you've got that aspect, which you were saying in a Hindu reflection, in some ways is really Ishvar, the terminology used. No,
That
is Brahman, is Brahman. Sorry. And yet you've got other verses of the Quran that are speaking like, and Allah's hand is above their hand, and Allah is like this, and Allah, which
that
which
all the description.
yeah, which is us really as a tool for us to kind of familiarize ourselves with Allah, and that in other traditions like the Hindu tradition is Ishvar. So okay,
And
yep.
the tradition is God the Father, God our heavenly Father.
Which one is God the Father? This one, Ishvar.
Brahman, the
The ultimate,
ultimate
the
reality.
categorically divine. Okay, okay.
So even in Christianity, I won't say that this description is even that explicit, but the most fundamental aspect of divinity, or even its subsequent Ishwar approximation, you can do with God the Father. I mean, then when the word becomes something like Quran, but that's a Mutazali debate. But we won't get into that. We'll get into that some next time. But let's come to
Ah.
this. Let's come to this interesting point. Now we come to the question of free will, which you were asking. Free will, determinism, problem of evil. How do I deal with it? Now the day, now it's now when you make that distinction,
Sorry,
the
did we answer just very quickly? Did we conclude on that there must be, why there must be a physical cause for the Big Bang? We concluded on that. Yeah.
did we can oh no, we didn't. We actually were discussing it. Okay, let me come to that one before free will. So see, the way I look at it. The way I look at it is, if you want to look at it theologically, and if I will want to look at it scientifically, and I'll show you, I'll tell you both the reasons. Let me start with theological reasons. Theologically, there's a beautiful verse in Quran which says, "You shall not find any inconsistency in the creation of most gracious. Look again and again, do you find any flaw?" And there is also another verse which says that you will find no change in the Sunnah of Allah.
Yeah. لن تجد لسنة الله تبديلا. Yeah.
Yes. And the other one was, I think, from Surah Mulk.
Yeah. فرجع
Uh,
yeah. There's. Mhm.
yeah.
I'm just.
So let's come to this one. Let's come to this idea. See, the ultimate reality is beyond. Like we have seen, space and time is only an approximation to reality. So the ultimate reality is beyond space, beyond time. So you would not expect time to be applying to the to the ultimate reality. So you would not see a change in the nature of ultimate reality. So given similar situations, the ultimate, you would expect statistical repeatability in the actions of most patients, and then of God from that. And this statistical repeatability appears causes the consistency of our universe. And this appears to us as laws of physics, because laws of physics fundamentally are derived from statistical repeatability of our universe. The idea is Quran provides a metaphysical reason for that statistical repeatability of universe. Universe is we observe universe to be statistically repeatable. You throw a stone, it falls down. You throw another stone, it always falls down with the same mass, same speed. You have the same initial conditions. Uh, your state evolves in the same way, and the reason for that is because ultimately everything is just a manifestation of the reality of God. But since time does not apply to God, you would not see a change in that manifestation. So everything would remain unchanged. And this is how, the universe would remain consistent. Point number one. Point number two is that the there you would not expect, because time doesn't apply to God, you would not expect the nature of God to change at the beginning of the universe. You would see God would bring some flaw and say, I need to fix this artificially. You see, my argument is different from Ghazalian arguments and the detheistic argument. I don't accept detheism, I don't accept Ghazali. And the reason is why I don't accept detheism, because they make the beginning of universe as a very spatial point, but we know space is time is just another dimension to space, and is not even that fundamental. So why
and
should it
and
apply
and
that
why from
fundamental?
Ghazali? What is how does it
Ghazali denies causality. Ghazali denies causality and accepts miracles. For me, my denial is not my denial. I think causality is an emergent reality of our universe, on which science is based.
yeah.
But it occurs because there's a metaphysical reason for causality, and that is because God is fundamentally beyond time. So his acts cannot change in time. You cannot expect a change in the nature of God. So for given the same situation, you would expect same results. And that is the basis of scientific law, and that is the basis because of which our universe is consistent. Scientifically speaking, again, it would be very strange. You see, how does science work? Let's go on to how science works. You see, you saw that Newton's law, for example, holds for planets, and Newton came up with the law of gravity, and it explained lots and lots of stuff. But then you came to a situation where Newton's law seemed to fail. The orbit of Mercury wasn't explained nicely by Newton's law.
Hmm.
Now there were two approaches you could take. You could say, why should universe follow a precise mathematical law? Maybe it only follows an approximate mathematical law. Maybe there is no precise mathematical law. It was a coincidence. You could also say maybe this theory became too computationally competent, and universe wasn't able to
Hmm.
compute it properly.
Hmm.
But if you do that, if you say, well, why should universe follow a precise law? Maybe there is this inconsistency in nature. If you take this view, this would be the death of science. Then you can't do science, because what the view that science takes is that even though we have not discovered this law, even though we have not discovered this law which explains the motion of orbit of Mercury, there is always a law. If we have discovered an inconsistency, it doesn't mean that there's inconsistency in nature. It means that there's a hyperstructure of which and this hyperstructure approximates to the structure observing, and this hyperstructure is more beautiful than the original structure,
Just to
as
be
Doraemon
clear
says.
for people, when you're saying hyperstructure, you're meaning like a great metastructure which contains
Yeah,
perhaps this structure.
relativity is a hyperstructure to Newton's law. Newton's law can follow from general relativity as an approximation. That's what I mean. So you believe in the existence of this theory, even though you have not proved the existence of this theory. It's not that we don't get inconsistent. Like we have certain theories, and there are certain data points which don't fit. But you believe that they should fit in a theory that does not exist, and this theory should be so beautiful, so consistent that it should reproduce the theory which we know of, and it should correctly explain these data points. But look at this. Before you have this theory, before you discover this theory, there is a belief in the existence of this theory. There is no logical foundations to that belief. It is just this belief. But it is the belief in this existence of this theory, belief in the existence of consistency of nature, that has led to scientific progress. Remove this belief, science crumbles. There is no more science
in
possible.
in
So
in some ways this is very similar, I'm just saying, or it translates to the argument of saying, what how do you justify uh reason always being the ultimate, like to for our understanding. And it's because you can't just, because if you give a reasonable argument to justify reason, you're just justifying it by itself.
Yeah,
That's obviously, so there comes a point where you have to kind of pull it up by its own bootstraps, and that's the
and
beginning point. It doesn't, you can't justify
yeah,
reason by reason because that's dumb.
talk about axiomatic structure. So you assume your axiomatic structure as a
this
reasonable
is
structure.
this is
Interestingly,
Gödel coming back in.
yeah, and interestingly, when you're talking of reason, you're talking of logic, but there's not one logic. There are many logics, and then
Hmm.
we get. But then that's a separate thing
Yeah.
on itself. So when we're talking even of reason, we like when we're saying this is reasonable, what we mean is that it's consistent in this given set of logical
Yeah,
execution.
I've always, this is why I've tried to use the term more reason than logic, because I feel that actually logic at the quantum realm collapses. As they generally say, like things can't be in two places at once, so they can't be like this. And I felt that reason, Aristotelian logic anyway, I suppose, if that's, yeah.
Yeah.
But I felt that where reason is the ability of a healthy mind to make judgment based on our experience. So because our
Yeah.
experience teaches us this, we can then make a judgment based on it. Yeah.
Yeah, and then there is something called like something where you can have reasonable discussions at some point. Then there are nutcases which come and say theory of evolution is not correct, and then I mean you know where you are. There is there are levels of sophistication where you can debate, and then there's absolute idioticity where you don't even need to address, which you don't even need to address.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But you
so
were saying, yes, so
but,
so coming back to what
yeah,
you were
so,
saying.
so before you got this theory of relativity, there was this belief in the consistency of nature, which would lead you to develop relativity. I mean, Einstein spent so many years developing general theory of relativity because he believed that there is this consistency. I mean, I spent so much of my life developing these theories. We
Mhm.
don't have experimental data points for them, just by developing beauty, mathematical beauty, and searching for consistency. But there is this belief, there is this subconscious belief which works on the mind of, I think, all scientists, that there is no inconsistency in the creation of those creations.
And
But they
this
won't
is
put
why
it linguistically.
I've argued that
They
this
won't
is why
linguistically identify
when Allah
it.
says
Go on.
about, when Allah is responding to the question that how does creation come about in the Quran, he says, "Qul siru fil ardi fanzuru kayfa bada al khalq." You want to know
Yeah.
how God began creation. Why don't you traverse the earth and look around you, observe? Now, if we take Hume's and this kind of philosophical argument that we can't really nature, I mean, just because it happens now, it doesn't mean it has to happen again. Really, all of the, from a religious viewpoint, why is God saying that? Why is he saying, look at this and look at this, if it changes every decade anyway? So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this belief in the consistency of nature is a fundamental belief. Whether most scientists would not linguistically identify it as such, but subconsciously, this is what works in their mind. I mean, I'll give you a really inconsistent theory. It's a stupid theory. It's a more stupid theory that American fundamentalists came up with. I mean, if they want to talk stupid, I can talk better stupid. I can make better stupid theories than them. It's a really, really dumb theory. And this really, really dumb theory is that everything in the universe was just created 2 seconds ago with our memories, with all the cosmic rays, with everything.
Oh yes, I've
And
come
there is no
across
way,
this theory. I've come across it. Yeah.
yeah, no way for us to disprove it. The reason why I would accept Big Bang and proper systematic evolution than this is not because there is anything like there's a missing data point in this theory, because this theory is not beautiful enough. And at my subconscious, I know that universe is created by God most gracious, and God most gracious is Al Hakim, and He is full of wisdom, and He would not do something so stupid.
But
So this
this
is the
argument,
belief
but this argument,
which leads to which
but this
for me
argument,
produces.
it can't be. It's not like it can't be kind of. I get the fact that we wouldn't ascribe to it, but it can't. Can it be easily torn apart? I mean, this thing, because I would have thought it's very difficult because it's a kind of
I,
self-containing.
I by you like it's in terms of just like some scientists like to put it that any theory is good as long as it satisfies data points. That's not precisely true. I mean, you can come up with absurd theories which are ugly and yet satisfy data points. I mean, when I review papers, I mean, I review other people's work. How would I judge whether a paper should be published in a really good journal or a really bad journal, or if it should be published at all, if there are two papers which don't contradict data? The idea would be that if one theory produces really elegant mathematical structures and is mathematically beautiful, then the other theory is just as good. I mean, if you, they want to talk stupid, I can talk better stupid. I can make better stupid theories than them. I would feel that this is more possibility to be true than the other one. So the way our mind works is this: we search for
We have
mathematical
a
beauty.
bias to aesthetics. Is that what we're
Yeah.
saying?
So we search for mathematical beauty and produce truth as a byproduct. This has always worked. This looks a strange opinion, but this is actually how,
Our
like, to be real,
beauty in
this is how
numbers.
we beauty
Is
in
this is
mathematical
this is
structure.
this why people want 2 and 3 and 4 wives? They see more beauty in numbers.
We see what they discuss specific human right interpretations to Quranic verses. I would say that, but
अच्छा अच्छा हाँ अच्छा सही justify किए हैं.
maybe I would not
You got no idea.
like,
You thought I
I have
married her. You thought I married her
a
because I'm. No, it's just I see the overwhelming beauty in numbers. You see, there's 3 wives now. There's 4. Oh my God, I'm overwhelmed. That's beautiful.
one thing we should really, at a serious level, talk about these issues, because one of the things is that there are 3 levels, I think, at which Islam has to be addressed, or any religion, world religion, specifically Islam, because I don't see Islam as a negation of other world traditions. I see it as a culmination, as a summary, as a completion of world tradition, world religion.
To in many extent, agree with you on that. That I don't see as a negation either.
Yeah, Quran is so explicit. Those who were like verse of verse. It's a completion of what went before it. It's not a negation of what went.
And hence, you see,
But
to me, that was the argument of Khatamun Nabiyyin, that the messenger
yeah,
of God, when people have asked me that, look, oh, but does this have to mean this? Does this have? I've said that, look, even atheists, like renowned people who I admire from their literary works, like Yuval Harari, I love his book *Sapiens*. But even he, in his interviews, and I've watched several of his interviews on YouTube, when he was asked about world religions, can you envisage a new emerging religion? And he said, look, as an anthropologist, as a historian, as he said that the reality is that there will never be any more world religions like those, unless you mean something different. But the world religions have been sealed. And the truth is, whether people like it or not, Islam sealed global faiths. There was never to be a global faith that would arise on that level after the emergence of Islam.
it's a historical fact in any
Yeah.
way. That you with that, and another way I look at it is that you see, human. We can discuss history one day. I mean, I've been doing some work on this, but we can
God,
argue that
is there a field that you're not doing work on, Professor?
I haven't published a lot of history, but I hopefully intend to. But yeah,
God.
so one of the things is that you can see history as an interaction of divine with humans, in the sense that we can come to how I view
Sure, sure,
revelation,
sure.
but then
Of course. Yeah,
that,
absolutely.
that's a separate matter. But you can do that, and offshot of that was like, so the divine interacted with humans throughout world civilizations, and world civilizations are based on these great people who have at least the moral fabric of these civilizations, who talk of some form of divine, and then this metaphysics of divine, and then immediate application to human values as translated epistemologically in those ages. And then Jewish people are special in the sense they form a prototype for this whole discourse. So
Jewish.
in a
Did you
certain
say
way,
Jewish?
yeah,
Or
Jewish,
okay,
Jewish.
I thought
Yeah.
just in case I say Jewish and people think, why is he bringing Jews up?
But Judaism is very interesting because it follows a prototype. So word of God is given to Moses, then it's a systematic interaction. The word of God becomes Jesus. So this is different. Like the word of God is given to Moses, becomes Jesus, and that in a way Jesus is the closure of the Jewish prophetic message. But then one thing is left for Jewish prophetic message, as well as the world religions. It's a summary of this spiritual interaction of divine with the mankind, and that spiritual interaction is summarized in Quran as a state of pure revelation, and that just is the last thing. That is like the concluding chapter. Now for us, Quran is a living prophet. We interact with its meaning. I do, however, yeah, we will come to those things again, but let's come to these specific things. So
Sure.
so let's yeah, we get this. I like you keep getting distracted. So so just like we believed in the existence of general relativity as an explanation to like we believed that there should be a theory explaining our orbit of Mercury, even if we don't have one,
Sure.
because there is this innate thing in us that we should have a, like nature should not be inconsistent.
Sure.
We have the same feeling when we come to Big Bang. I don't think there is a singularity at Big Bang. I think this Big Bang should be completely and perfectly explained by the laws of physics. We now can we do that? A lot of my work is about that. We have, as I told you, we have different approaches to quantum gravity. Each of those approaches can produce models which can explain Big Bang. None of them, but since none of these theories are complete, we don't have a complete explanation to Big Bang. But we can have models explaining Big Bang. I did a lot of work on pre-Big Bang cosmology, how Big
Okay.
Bang can occur,
How?
how
Okay.
space-time can dynamically be created. You
Okay.
can,
Is there any
I
simple way to explain, or is that non? It cannot be translated to
yeah,
simple speak.
many different there are many different versions. The simplest one is what Lawrence Krauss says, which is inflation. That you have an inflaton field which occurs because of this, quantum uncertainty. You can have small energy created, and then this inflaton will emerge. But you have a problem with that because inflation
Is
really
this?
would
Is
work like,
this? By the way, is this ex nihilo? This is out of nothing. We're saying.
yeah, this is the problem. Yeah, the problem
Or
with
because I've
inflation is
heard Lawrence Krauss say that on certain in certain lectures that I've heard him say that when we say nothing, we don't actually mean nothing. We mean like there's a, like now we know of the Higgs field and we know of other things. But is this so? When you're saying out of nothing, are we
that
assuming?
yeah. So that's his criticism. So when you're talking about inflation, which technically speaking is something called a second quantized theory, you can get creation of energy out of nothing. By nothing we mean no substance, no it, but you pre-assume a fixed structure, and you can get creation of energy. But one of the problems with with this theory is that it's not ex nihilo in that sense, because you pre-assume the a pre-structure
Yeah,
in which this happens. But then there are theories called third quantized theories, which I have worked
third
on. And
quantized.
interestingly, third quantized string theory is string field theory. I just did a paper on that. Third quantized loop quantum gravity is called group field theory, and there's something called group
But
field
by the way,
cosmology. I've
when
written
when
paper
when you
on
guys finish this, we're gonna send you all a degree in quantum physics.
that. And third quantized, and you can have many theories of which are third quantized. And in these third quantized theories, you have ex nihilo, you have complete ex nihilo. You start with no time, no space, just a mathematical structure, and then do manipulations, and space time comes out.
T0 and
Yes,
just
no time, no space. It's pre-time, pre-space, and then I'll tell you something interesting I did. I wrote one that has to be the craziest paper I ever wrote. I did something called fourth quantization. Actually,
okay.
this started as a question about fourth, but
I don't think
finally this one is
anything
a fourth.
seems crazy to us anymore now. I mean, we're beyond that level now.
So before quantized theories, what you had was, I don't think I ever said this to, some of my work has been translated to for popular public, especially certain through some articles of physics.org and other newspapers. But I don't think I've said this before, but let me explain. So in
Say,
third quantization, you can have creation of universes from nothing. When I did fourth quantization, what we had was creation of multiverses from nothing. And then you could have multiverses colliding with multiverses and annihilating whole multiverses. Don't know if I did the interactive multiverse, but it's possible. But yeah, so I did something called fourth quantization.
of,
In
of,
principle, one person asked me that can you do nth quantization, in which you have the structure repeating nth time or infinite time. I have not built such a structure, but in principle, you can think of this
when
nth
you say
quantization.
when you say I build these things, do you mean you build formulas on computers or you build actual kind of structures on using software? Is that what you do? What?
No. What we do is we do mathematical modeling. So computer software gets into it, but a lot of it is also analytical calculations. A lot of
Hmm.
it is analytical calculations, because it's not
Wow.
only numeric. Like you can learn some things from numerics. I think I've used a lot of numerical programs with my collaborators, but really deep down you use analytical calculations, and sometimes think, okay, mathematics. Like let's get into mathematics. Mathematics works on three levels. One is the numerics. You see numbers. More than that, you see equations, analyticity, and then more than that, you see abstract mathematics. So you have abstract mathematics like group theory, topology, and fields like that, in which you can make some really powerful general statements. So mathematics works on these three levels.
Wow.
Mm,
You know what's amazing is this. I think most of creation is blind to all of this, isn't it? Is this this is an exclusive world, isn't it? It's like a.
this is-
I don't think like you could. I don't know how you have your daily conversations with people. I mean, people around you must think, what is, you see, because they say, there's a saying that the more, you know, highly specifically intelligent you are, the more dumb you sound to dumb people. Like that's how, because to people must be thinking, what is he on about?
So I think how exclusive this club is. Sometimes the club is so exclusive. People working on string theory don't know anything outside string theory, and people working on, for example, loop quantum gravity would not know anything outside that. So it's not even and then these things become so technical that they can't even mutually understand each other. And then there are many other approaches to quantum gravity, and then they would not know anything. And people who do cosmology, for example, sometimes a lot of my work has been just motivated by this way, that I tell people from here, hey, you have this nice technique. Can we borrow it? And I get somebody from here. These guys have this nice technique. Why don't you use it? so, so I sometimes mediate between people, different groups of scientists working on it, and that has led to some really interesting work.
Wow. But yes, so you were saying that you were bringing all of this in saying, look, there are these presuppositions, there are these things, they do demonstrate to us through your calculations as well, and your kind of formulated theories or theorems that look, uh, the Big Bang also reflects that there was a kind of physical uh, predecessor to it, if you like not physical but physics related,
Yeah, yeah.
force
So there,
related
and there
predecessor.
are three ways you can do it. You can do it as one of the simplest ways you can do it in is in string theory, where you can have two universes colliding in x. You see, in string theory, you don't have four dimensions of space, like space time. So three of space, one of time. You have 10 or
Isn't it
11
10?
dimensions.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
10 in superspace, 11 in M theory, and I think yeah, so 11 in M theory.
Yeah.
So what you would have in these dimensions is that you would have these universes, which are like brains in these extra dimensions as
Hmm.
membranes. They would just collide, and then you could have creation, and that would appear as a big bang. That would be the simplest explanation, that universe would collide and form other universes. In loop quantum gravity, the universe is expanding. It will undergo a phase transition and start collapsing, and then it will reach a critical volume, and then it can't collapse below that. The gravity will become repulsive, and then it will expand. In most third quantized models, you can have creation of universe from nothing. And in one of the really interesting things I did was, you can have creation of universe in this abstract mathematical space, which is an infinite dimensional configurational space of all fields, using third quantization, and then you can have interaction in them, and these interactions can create and annihilate universes, just like. But then there are the many different ways of
And
doing
that's
it.
not, is that similar to parallel universes then, or?
Well, in the first model we talked about would be similar to parallel universes. So, like,
Mhm.
if you see my TED talk, I would recommend the
Ah,
audience. So,
your TED Talk. People, you have to check out Professor's TED
so
Talk.
I had a TEDx talk on this, and what happened was that in that was this is what I described: how parallel universes can exist in extra dimensions. So, in the simplest way, like, you have two sheets of paper. They're like, let's imagine them to be ideal two-dimensional sheets. They can be parallel to each other in a third dimension. So if you have 10-dimensional space-time, our universe can be parallel to other universes in this 10 dimension. Sabah
Hmm.
samawat.
Yeah. I mean,
So
I feel the Quran always, it's, I felt that it has so much kind of like, amongst it, and I'm not saying the majority of it, it may be a minority, but it has in it like this kind of cryptic language sometimes that, and amongst that is things like this sab'a samawat and what is meant by this, that,
this is the thing. You see, one of the ways what I don't like sometimes Muslims do is that Morris Bukai wrote an amazing book on Bible, Quran, and science. Subsequently, people took that work and they were not even experts in field, and they started speaking a lot about it, and a lot of it did not make sense. But
Yeah.
that, you should be really careful in uttering any sentence. Like, for example, the word samawat in Quran, I have been doing work on it, and we can discuss it next time on your show.
Sure.
I think it's really non-trivially used. I mean, it's used for atmosphere. It's used for a spiritual realm. It's used for when Quran talks of our universe in a multiverse, it uses from samawat dunya. When it talks about a physical universe, it uses samawat wal ard, and for heavens and earth. And when it uses samawat is a bit ambiguous. It can be used for many things: spiritual, our universe, or or the atmosphere. And when it talks of multiverse, it talks of Sabha Samawat. And by the way, that also has certain things in Sufi traditions, of going back to Buddhist tradition, when you talk of many phases of enlightenment. So it's loaded with meaning. But sometimes if you have a superficial reading of it, you just don't appreciate that. We can
Wow.
have a complete discussion one day. And that naive thing that people bring out, that for example, just a simple example, that people might bring out this thing, that creation of universe, God says creation of heavens and earth in 6 days, and then creation of earth in two, and
Oh, yes,
distribution
yes,
of.
yes, of course.
It's actually so loaded in meaning, but it's just because people confuse the creation of heavens and earth with a separate creation of earth and with the separate creation of multiverse. But if you read it properly, like if you, as I said, make an algorithm, separate out what each word would mean and separate out what this is, and then see if you can form a correlation. This is a very loaded meaning, which we can discuss next time. Like,
Is it
we can do a
okay?
nice next discussion nicely on what specific verses mean. But for example, for this verse, I have been working on it for some time before even being able to speak on it.
Wow.
What one thing I would recommend people not doing is, don't speak about things you do not know.
Yeah.
Either borrow from experts, that's fine, but don't just throw out stuff that you don't know, because that way you might be saying something which is not correct. And
And
make
you
a
may
consistent.
actually be doing more damage to
Yeah.
things than yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
yeah.
I mean, a lot of this sunnah has this medical benefit, and then you go on and check it. Like, first of all, I mean, there's argument about if that can be proved as sunnah, and I don't see, like where did you get this from? Like, you have to be very, very specific when you do these interpretations. Very, very specific. Very, very honest.
Right.
You
That
do
no.
not
That's
need.
it's been that it's been overwhelming the amount of just the amount of information. Seriously, that's been really poured generously on this episode. Subhanallah. I think people will have to really take breaks, search up words, search up concepts, and resume. I wanted a quick question, and I know we've been going on for a while, and we will conclude because
I have been like, we have been starting the discussion and then getting sidetracked. Can I get back to free
of
will,
course.
predestination, and problem of evil? Because I think that's really important.
Sure, 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 sure. Go for it. Go for it, Professor.
Yeah, like yeah, and it would be nice dividing this later on. You do that really nicely with your videos into these
Yeah,
different
I will
topics.
be I will be dividing these inshallah in
Yeah,
time to come.
I see more of the videos than your long chats, sadly, because they somehow seem more interesting to me.
I was overwhelmed. I said to Professor before we went live, I said I'm overwhelmed that Professor is watching my videos. I would not have expected, not have imagined that here we've got somebody so in his world of quantum physics and such, in that kind of that's to me that's a very kind of a very a niche elitist kind of world, and for somebody from that world to have an interest and watch my videos, it's a huge, it's flattery. I'm flattered, honestly.
And like Mufti, like of course, I've been deeply touched by Quran, and a lot of like Quran has touched me the most, very, very deeply. And spiritual practices of Islam, which are mutawatir practices, as Javed Namdi would say, our living tradition, as you would say, prayers, zakat, especially not zakat, especially zakat is something you pray, but something which you experience, something like prayers or fasting, and definitely zakat in terms of how it would help humanity. These things have really touched me, especially the prayers, especially the five prayers are something that
Wow.
can deeply, deeply, like if you, I was telling this thing to Mufti, if you ask me what is the highest amount of pleasure I have ever experienced, I would say, when you experience sakina in Islam, sakina in Judaism, or Holy Spirit in Christianity, when you're doing your salat and you remember, you recite Quran and you experience divine, that's the highest amount of pleasure, and you have a very different amount of certainty at that point. Of course,
Wow.
when you go get out of that state, it remains to you as a memory, but that point, it's another level. You have no doubts, you have complete certainty at that time. Now, not even doubts, it's a different thing to believe something by arguments, and it's a different thing to experience and know it's true. At that time, you go beyond beyond description. You know it the way you know you exist. You know this is true. um, but
Wow.
I had respect for mutawatir practices, and because of what I had experienced, and great respect for Quran, but I had zero respect for early Islamic scholarship. I mean, I when I read especially a lot of their works, I thought they are dumb. But like, how much this respect has brought to me, like if I have some amount of respect now, and that would be thanks to Mufti Abu Layth after listening to you, I said, well, they're not that dumb. I mean, I'm not counting Sufi literature like Ibn Arabi and all, but a lot of other literature, like, what are they talking about? Like, the Quran is so, what are these people talking about? So I had literally, like, I thought this is like, I didn't have much respect for that, but a lot, if anything, Mufti Abu Layth has brought some respect for early Islamic scholarship in my eyes. Not that I would, I mean, I would of course see it as a human attempt to encompass divine, but at least I would not think they're all nutcases the way I used to think.
Hmm. Wow.
But yeah,
Mashallah.
so Mufti
Mashallah.
Abu Layth,
I'm shukran, shukran. I'm deeply
yeah,
touched and honored.
that's
But
what I wanted to discuss.
yeah, of
Free will
course.
and predestination. Okay, let's stick to this one for a minute. Free will
Mhm.
and predestination. How to, because I think we brought it a few times, and this would really fit in with what I'm discussing. Otherwise, this would be confusing. So, see, we distinguished between Ishwar and Brahman. We distinguished between Laisali Mitlika Shai, no vision can comprehend him. There's no similitude of him, and he's Samiun Basir. He hears and
Mhm.
sees. So, we distinguished between God in the most ultimate sense and its linguistic identification that we do in religious scriptures. And for me, Quran is the best linguistic approximation of divine. It by itself shows that it's not a perfect linguistic approximation of divine, because perfection only belongs to the divine. The fact that you have words like alif lam mim which don't have meaning means that you cannot take it as an absolute thing. If you absolutize the language of Quran, you cannot do it, because you would still be left with a residual sentences which don't have meaning in grammar.
Mhm.
So this would be a best approximation of divine. Having said that, any best approximation which does not completely explain the system would break down at certain point. You see,
Mhm.
if you, for example, like Hooke's law would break down, because atomic physics cannot be completely described by Hooke's law. When your spoon breaks down, the atomic you would get an inconsistent result. Any linguist, this is very important. Any linguistic description of divine will break down. I even
Mhm.
extend it to experiential approximations, but specifically to any linguistic approximation of divine would break down. And this breakdown of language to describe divine would lead to apparent paradoxes. Now, these paradoxes don't exist in divine, they exist because the tool we are using, which is language, to describe the divine is not, divine is far beyond description. So we have to understand this difference between divine and the linguistic difference, linguistic description of divine. Now
Mhm.
you could ask the question that can you have a better language which would still have inconsistencies but less inconsistencies than your
Okay.
original
Mhm.
language, which we have got through evolutionary process to describe our world around us? And the answer to that is yes. You see, let's go to something really simple, like the quantum mechanics of a particle.
I love it. Love it.
So from simplest system, I can't imagine a more simpler system, a single particle quantum system.
Mhm.
You can't know its position and its momentum at the same time. It is not that you cannot know it. If you know its position properly and you try to know its momentum properly, you will get inconsistencies. You cannot do that. As soon as you measure its position, you lose all information about its momentum. And as soon as you measure its momentum, you lose all information about its
This
position.
is what
It
we're
is
speaking about, the spin and the and it's that's what we, and its position.
I'm imagining a simple quantum particle, simple even you can take it as a spin zero particle, just the fact that it exists at a point and has a momentum. You
Mhm.
cannot know both of these things precisely. If you know one, it becomes meaningless to talk about it. It's not that you cannot know it. You can, or some aliens with a supercomputer can know it, or some aliens with a very great computer can know it. It's not that. It's that this information does not exist. You can only extract some information from this system, and that's it. And if you try to extract more information from this system, the system will give you inconsistent results. There's only a certain amount of information you can extract from this system, because fundamentally, as I told you, universe is mathematical. So you can, so in the logic, built in the logic of this mathematics is that you can only extract some amount of information. You cannot extract all information from the system.
Mhm.
It's very important. It's not that we
Okay.
don't have good technology.
Yeah.
You might have alien technology. You cannot still know its momentum. It doesn't know. As soon as you know its position, the information about momentum does not exist. And if you try to ask now, if you try to ask what is its momentum, you will get inconsistent answers. And this
Okay.
won't be a good description of its system anymore. You can only describe this system by inventing mathematically this fact that you can't know these quantities precisely. Okay.
Okay.
Now, if it holds true for something as simple as a quantum particle, surely a physical system, a very simple physical system, it surely will should hold true for more abstract metaphysical statements. So how would I approach this statement? Is this way: is everything predestined? Yes. Can you do you have free will? I have already extracted all information. I cannot tell you anything for both. It's like momentum and position. Do we have free will? Yes, absolutely yes. Can you is there predestination? I've already spoken everything. I've already extracted all linguistic
Whoa, whoa,
information
whoa.
I
Okay,
can from.
okay, okay. Wait. Okay. Replay on this part. This thing.
Okay, so you understood how a quantum, how it becomes meaningless to talk about position and momentum of a quantum
Of course.
particle.
Of course. Of course.
So I'm
Yeah.
saying if something as simple as a single particle quantum system, you cannot do this.
Yeah.
It means that to describe nature, you cannot have precise deterministic language in which you pre-assume that you can take 100% information out of the system and yet remain yet the language yet this linguistic structure remains consistent. You cannot do that even for a simple quantum particle.
Okay. Yep. That makes sense.
So you can't do this for a quantum particle using mathematics. Language is also a logical system. So I'm saying that you can, if you apply the same thing to metaphysics, what you can say is that yes, everything is predestined, but now I cannot know anything about free will. It's like the position and momentum of a quantum particle. I have already taken all the information from the linguistic structure that I
Ah,
can, and
right.
now my
Okay.
linguistic no more information. It's not that the language breaks down if I try to take any more information out. Language is not designed to be that much. So I can impose this additional restriction on my deterministic language, and it becomes a better approximation to divine. I still would say that I can't think of it, but there would be possible inconsistencies, yeah, you would get, because even this non-deterministic language should not be able to completely encompass divine. No vision can comprehend it. What is that ayah, Mufti? That's a beautiful ayah. No vision can comprehend him, but his comprehension is over all
Oh,
visions.
لا تدرك الأبصار وهو يدرك الأبصار. Yeah,
Yes.
that no sight can encapsulate Allah, yet He sees all. He kind of
Yes.
encapsulates all sight.
Yes. And language is a sign. Language is a vision. So language cannot encompass like under completely understand God. You cannot completely understand God in language. So this is the thing. But I would say if you use this non-deterministic language motivated from quantum mechanics, you can at least explain free will and predestination nicely, because you can have restriction that you can only take restricted information out of a linguistic structure before it breaks down. So if it does, is everything predestined? Yes. What about your free will? Structure breaks. Do you have free will? Absolutely. Do you can? What about predestination? Structure breaks. Is God all good? Yes, absolutely. Is God all powerful? Structure breaks. Is all God all powerful? Yes. Is God all good? Structure breaks.
This is
This
amazing. I've not seen this kind of an explanation. It is incredible. Is the Am I correct? This is the Heisenberg uncertainty principle.
Yeah,
That's what we're
this is the
referring to.
Heisenberg principle applied to language. What
Yeah.
I am basically claiming is that if you cannot have deterministic logical system describing something as simple as a quantum particle, it would be absurd to think that a deterministic linguistic system in which you can take out 100% information can be used to approximate metaphysical, questions. What then I'm proposing that if you use this Heisenberg uncertainty principle in a philosophical way,
Yeah.
you can have this restrictive linguistic structure which would be a better approximation of divine. And I am warning that even this structure I cannot, even though I can't think of it, it will get inconsistencies because language is nothing can encompass the divine. Language definitely cannot encompass the divine.
Wow. That is
Yes.
very well explained. Um I mean that is
It
an I feel a
paradox.
very it's a valuable input to the discourse of al qadar within Muslim theology, because it's something that we have struggled with as a Muslim ummah, really. When you read the books, it's always just because they're just saying things which are inconsistent. And they'll say something now, they'll begin the paragraph with one sentence stating something, and then they'll just completely contradict it as they finish. Yeah.
It actually is a solution to many things. Take Russell's paradox. I think it was Russell who made it, right? That can God lift a stone? Can God make a stone that he cannot lift? I would break this paradox into two things. Can God lift any stone? Yeah. Can God make any stone? Yes. Yeah, a stone. Can he lift that stone? Already extracted all information. Systems becomes inconsistent. Language fails. You see,
Yeah.
our problem is that, you see, only God is worthy of worship and only God is perfect. Anything besides God is not perfect. And our problem is we create idols from, from his creation and try to make them perfect as God. Sometimes idols can be physical, sometimes they can be ideas, and sometimes they can be language itself. I'll tell you something which strikes me very as something interesting, and
Sure.
I will tell you this. I mean, it's again from Quran. So Quran says that we shall show you our signs within yourself and in the horizon till it becomes known to them that this is the truth. So
في
there can be
الآفاق
signs.
وفي أنفسكم. Absolutely.
Yeah,
في
there
أنفسكم
can
حتى يتبين لهم أنه الحق.
exactly. So there can be signs which can be within ourselves, which are spiritual experiences. There can be signs that you can discover as a scientist, which are in the horizon, which in the structure
Of
of the
course, of
universe.
course.
And both of them are called ayah. But Quran also calls itself ayah. And Quran also says that sun and moon are ayahs of God. Don't do sujood to sun or moon, do sujood to Allah. So these are pointers to God, pointers to divine. Sun is a pointer, moon is a pointer, universe is a pointer, our spiritual experiences are a pointer, scripture is a pointer, Quran is a pointer, but we do not do sujood to any of them. We do sujood to Allah. We search perfection only in Allah. And it is the idealization of these ayahs which creates problem. If you idolize sun, you make an idol out of a, you can make idol out of suns and moon and star becomes a sun worshipper or a moon worshipper. You can make an idol out of the rational structure of universe, and then you would still become an idol worshipper. You can make an idol out of your own spiritual experience, and that's sometimes how so many Sufis get deviated. And you can make an idol out of the sign of Allah, which is Quran, and that is what happens to religious fundamentalists. So all of these are just pointers, but we worship none but God,
Yeah.
and that I think is really good.
That's amazing. Subhanallah. Very well said, by the way. So, yeah. Okay, mashallah. I think in terms of free will, in terms of uh, destiny, that discussion, in terms of how we how do we view the verses of how do we view scripture in our real world as part that we should see as almost like an interacting entity. That's what we're which is a signifier towards God.
God.
Yeah.
Yeah. rather than make become. And I find these verses like Alif Lam Mim so profound, because you see what is the problem of religious fundamentalists? They absolutize the scripture,
Yeah.
and and the problem, this is the problem. But when you have verses like this which don't have meaning in grammar, then they don't have meaning. But they're being meaningless is their meaning. For example, if I tell you that I give you certain instructions to reach a certain destination, first instruction is ABCD, what you would understand from this is that I should not become too literalist about these instructions, then I will lose my way.
Yeah. I mean, you
So
recognize straight
verse,
away there's a symbolism here to some extent. Yeah.
yes, you recognize that you cannot absolutize language, because say if you take a Salafi interpretation and absolutize everything, they can't even absolutize Alif Lam Mim, can they?
Yeah, exactly.
It doesn't have meaning in grammar.
Amazing. You're doing it, Professor. That is amazing. That is amazing. I've just taken a look. Some people had put some. I was just seeing about their questions that there is no. Yeah, that's fine. I thought there were certain questions linked, but no. So
Thank
okay.
you.
So, I think they're still trying to digest what's being said. But yeah. So okay, and
Somebody called Sir Wolfendale, and what he said was, what the description you're having of God is, I can't deconstruct it. It's not deconstructible. But this is not the God that Jews, Muslims, and Christians believe in. I was like, that's not my concern. My concern is, I don't have allegiance to people. I have like we search truth. That's what really.
why is it not the God of 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 the scripture?
Theology. I would say, you see, when we are taking, okay, like if I make it explicit, theology of Muslims, Christians, and Jews, you see, I would
Oh,
say
we mean
Islam,
like
Christianity,
the standardized version. Okay.
yeah, statistical statement.
Because
I
I
would not
feel that everything you're saying is
is
in
from
line with the scripture, is in line with the Quran, but it may not be in line with some people's kind of perspectives. That's different. But
exactly, exactly. So for me, you see, this is the thing that there is a question of revelation of God which occurs, which is one thing, which is the foundation of religion. But then post that, there is a human development of scripture. I mean, revelation is in itself very interesting. Quran has such a nice explanation to what revelation is. I don't think anybody can again discount what Quran says about revelation. I mean, do you want, like, maybe I can tell you a bit about how I look at revelation, and then you can give me your take on it.
sure. Mm.
Uh, you see, Quran says we have revealed to the honeybee to make its homes. We have revealed to the honeybee. This is really important. So what is Quran talking about here? You see, when we as humans deal with anything, when we are even dealing with, when we are building our thought process, what our thought process, the way logic works is that it works on certain axiomatic knowledge, but there is no way for us to get this axiomatic.
Yeah.
So we are getting this random axiomatic knowledge, and it's not algorithmically generated in our mind. This is just coming.
Are
This
we
this like
we're speaking of intuitive kind of knowledge that we have,
yeah.
yeah?
Yes. So for me, all this intuitive knowledge that we have, all this axiomatic knowledge that we have, essentially is what represents revelation. But then you would say, what is special? What is special about Quran? Because most humans have intuition.
Of
The
course, of course.
speciality of the speciality of Quran is what Quran says itself, that it does not mix with the lower desires of Prophet, and it is not from the shayateen, which is, you see, you can have this knowledge coming in from, so, and then this knowledge, now we're talking in abstract terms. So what these terms mean, I have not defined. What does shayateen mean, I have not defined.
Sure.
And what angels mean, I have not defined. Hopefully we can define these terms better in our next episode. Let's
Sure.
just say that the sources of information in our mind, of what they are, how they work, we will, like, what part of consciousness, we will come to that, and that's an interesting discourse by itself. But let's talk in terms of the way we would talk in terms of computer program, that this is a program, this is another virus in that program. So your the knowledge that you're getting from God is continuously mixing with your lower desires and with what is being revealed by shayateen.
Mhm.
You need a you need some kind of a scale of pure revelation from God to distill what is pure and what is impure. And Quran claims to be that pure revelation. That is all. So I think revelation is a continuous process. But this pure state of revelation has been preserved for us in form of
Of course.
Quran.
Mhm.
And this is how I take revelation. So we have a pure state of revelation, and God has had this interaction through human history, but its subsequent development is a human endeavor. The details of Islamic fiqh are human endeavor. The details of
Of
Islamic
course, of
theology
course.
are human endeavor. And I was telling Mufti Abu Layth, like as much as I'm touched by Quran, I sometimes end up laughing on them. Like some of the old Mufassirin, they're like what are they going about? It doesn't make any sense. It's not even like product of their age. Sometimes it's like, what are they really talking about?
Yeah, true. I mean, sometimes the commentators absolutely agree. Some people have asked if they could post some very quick questions. I'm just trying to see where the questions are because I can see loads of just random conversations, people asking. Let me see if I can see some quick questions, and maybe we can just you can maybe do like a rapid round, and we could and then inshallah wrap this up. Let's see what are people. If you've I can't see I can see saying give him our questions. Zeba, I can see you saying give him our questions, but I can't seem to see the questions here. I can just see we do. That isn't a question. Why do we need to believe that everything is predetermined? Why do we need to believe that?
Okay, why do we need to believe everything is predetermined?
Hmm.
That's a good question. Like one of the things is that what do we mean by everything is predetermined? Because scientifically speaking, so again, we have to break it down in terms of what we mean by predestination. Scientifically speaking, even if we know the initial conditions to the of the universe, or even if we know the conditions of universe, like you even if you know the position of all the atoms right now, or all the possible information about the universe that you know right now, can you uniquely determine the future of the universe? The idea is not precisely because of quantum uncertainty.
Hmm.
So you cannot do that. But then the question is, what do we mean by predestination? We are not talking about
Because
this,
isn't the scientific view a hard fatalist kind of
no, no,
fate?
that's
Is it not?
Laplacian determinism. No, with quantum mechanics, you can kind of know, you can know probabilist statements which are most probably true, but definitely you cannot. If you want to say that you know the precise position of every single atom in the universe after even given all the possible information right now, of course you can't
Yeah.
because of simple Heisenberg uncertainty. You can't even do it for a
Hmm.
single particle.
I see.
So we definitely, when I'm saying determinism, I definitely do not mean the Laplacian determinism of that sort.
Okay. Hmm.
But now let's take it one step further. When we are talking of information and knowing information, we are talking of a structure in space and time. Determinism means what? If I know universe at a point in time at time t1, I living inside this universe should be able to know it at point t2. That is impossible. But then if we are talking of pre I already argued in the beginning that space and time is an approximation to something more fundamental. So this four fundamental aspect of reality surely cannot evolve in, like, it cannot have this constraint of time put on it. So in that structure, of course, in that sense, there is perfect knowledge of everything.
Hmm.
And then in this bit, not from the it quantum mechanics would prohibit you from knowing it, but from a bit perspective, from the fundamental axiomatic law perspective, you would have perfect knowledge. And then we argued that the fundamental behind this fundamental due to Gödelian limitation was pure consciousness, and then definitely there the knowledge would happen. In this sense, in the sense of knowledge, if you want to make it simple, yes, God knows everything, but even from a scientific perspective, we cannot know everything about the universe. It's simple. Put it simply.
Hmm.
I do want to clarify 2 points which should not be misunderstood, and because I had to struggle with them. When I say God is When I say the most fundamental aspect of universe is God, or most fundamental, not universe, most fundamental aspect of reality is God, or as
Hmm.
or in other words, is consciousness. What I should be rather more careful, and I should say the best possible linguistic description of the most fundamental aspect of reality is that it is conscious compared to that compared to it being unconscious. Because really, when I'm saying conscious, I'm still making a similitude. See, I'm making a similitude based on my consciousness,
Hmm.
and there is no similitude.
And just to
So
be
even
clear, okay, you're here when you're saying consciousness, you don't do you mean by that the consciousness of God, or do
yes,
you mean the
the
consciousness
consciousness of
of
God.
God? Because
Like I want to clarify.
I would because I kind of subscribe to this understanding of non-local consciousness, but you don't. So just being clear on that, yeah, okay.
No, no, definitely. I mean, I do not.
Hmm.
I only use human consciousness as an analogy to argue for divine consciousness.
Hmm.
So I
Okay.
do mean God. And I make a stronger point here. I say that when I'm saying that God is conscious, the most fundamental aspect of reality is consciousness. I would be more careful and say it's a better the better linguistic approximation for Brahman, or the ultimate divine, or Laisali Mitli Kashai, is that it is conscious, then it's unconscious. Because even when we are saying consciousness, we are making a mythal on our consciousness. And
Hmm.
it's not that God is not God is unconscious, but God is so beyond conscious. It is just like God. It's not that God cannot see or hear. Of course, God can see or hear, but like His knowledge is already perfect. He's
Hmm.
already. Yeah, one last comment again I would like to make with determinism and free will. One of the real problems that you might get, and I will simplify it again, and we can have a better discussion next time, but let me give you the simplified version of it. Somebody asked me, do you think prayers can change your physical world?
Okay. Hmm.
This is an interesting thing. Do you think God can listen to your prayers? And my response was, God has already listened to my prayers in the initial conditions of Big Bang.
You're like, where do you think the noise of the Big Bang was coming from? That was all my praise.
The basic idea is that universe is made into such a hyper consistent structure that this is really interesting, that universe is made into, you see, we have a law of morality that which Quran talks of, like when people were doing bad, God punished them. And then somebody would say that's not really, like, he would see the other aspect of reality and say this is all physical phenomena. The volcano just blew up not because these people were doing evil, but because of natural forces within the earth. But I think what the way I look at this whole thing is that there is a hyper consistent structure. There's a complete consistency of physical law, and there is a complete consistency of moral law, and both of them occur in such a way, in such a hyper consistent structure, that one thing complements the other. These people do evil things just near a volcano when the volcano is about to burst, and
Hmm.
it's like, again, nurul ala nur, light
Yeah,
upon light.
I've kind of in not in as articulately as you've said it in physic terms, but I've said very similar arguments explaining how these things, how these naturalistic kind of supernatural events took place, if I can call them supernatural, just how people. I've said that these things coincide, and that this kind of hyper structure that you're speaking of, just fits that description just perfectly. Yep. So, okay. There's a quick question here, and then inshallah we'll try wrapping this up. One, two quick questions people have put here. They've said one question is by Abdurrahman Fayyad. Does the professor believe Allah has a location?
Of course, astaghfirullah, Allah has no location. I don't even believe location is absolute. As I said, space
It's
and
not
time are an.
emergent property, ain't they?
Yeah, Allah is not, of course, Allah is by definition the most fundamental aspect. I don't even believe physics. I believe you can do physics without location. I do that. I mean, in third quantization, your physical laws have
You're
location.
talking about Professor himself does physics without location. Abe,
Yeah, I mean,
Siko ko jailo, Siko.
space and time. How can the most fundamental aspect? I mean, it would be absurd to think about it. I don't know where this idea, maybe from a literalist idea.
Right,
But
okay.
what
Another
does the right?
question.
So
Uh,
there are locations. space and time is such a trivial, like our scale dependent statement to make about
Basically,
our universe.
it's stupid. In the words of Takashi 69.
Yeah,
Stupid.
got it. Nice.
Right, so another quick question. It states, I'm just trying to see, the possibility of finding anything faster than the speed of light.
Good one. We have not found anything faster than speed of light. In bosonic string theory, we have certain fields like tachyons, but they are not supposed to be physical. But in case, okay, let's put it like that. In case you do find something faster than speed of light, can we explain it? I think we can. What we would require to do is we would need to break some symmetry at a certain scale, which is called Lorentz symmetry. If you do break Lorentz symmetry, you can have faster than speed of light. I have a collaborator. I wrote one paper with him actually. His name is John Moffat. He was the first student of Abdus Salam. He
Okay.
has worked on this faster than speed of light theories. But that's like the theory was that there was the light moved faster than than the present speed at the beginning of the universe. I almost ended up writing a paper on that, but we did not finish the work with somebody else. I was trying to do
Wow.
some interesting something called Wheeler-DeWitt equation with the faster than speed of light. I don't remember why I didn't finish that work, but yeah, that's like you start many works and then you sometimes end up not finishing the calculation. But I won't say I've worked on these faster than speed of light theories. I almost ended up writing a paper on it. Maybe you just reminded me. Maybe I should go back and look into what happened here. Look into my own personal electric calculation. Yeah, thank you.
No, you're most welcome. Let's just see any other quick questions here. Let me just see people. Unfortunately, today the Facebook, for some reason, feed the comments weren't coming through on here. So, but the YouTube
Wow.
comments are still. So these are all
I
from
I don't know how
uh,
Facebook comments and how.
Christian idea is like God lives in heaven. Lol. Okay, we were determined to have free will. I'm not sure. They put a question mark. I'm not really sure if that makes a question, but I'm sure you've answered that as it is. How do you prove the Kaaba is the center of the earth through quantum physics? I'm not sure that really is a question for quantum physics, but do you feel that's a question?
Yeah, let's leave the trivial questions aside.
Oh, here's a you've got what would
Center
you
of the earth is really like the geography. The center of the earth is the core of the earth. Earth is a sphere. A point on the earth cannot be center. Kaaba is just a place is a house towards which we worship, and it's a qibla. It's not the center of the earth.
sure?
Yeah,
There's a
so
here's a more
another really important point here. You see,
sure.
when you hear a statement like this, Kaaba is the center of the earth, for example, let's take this
Mhm.
statement per se, and you keep repeating these statements without verifying these statements. And by verification, I don't mean going back to Islamic websites and seeing if an Islamic website says this. Verify these facts. Either you understand them and see this is the logic, or you go to a neutral scientific site and go back to that, and then that scientific site should refer to a paper published in a pre-review journal. Don't quote these facts. Seriously, they do a lot of harm. Take some time, verify it, and know what you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, you'll just shock people. And then you know what happens when Quran is a beautiful structure in itself. But when you come up with these kind of things, people are drawn away from Islam because these people just speak anything.
Sure. There's a quick
They don't.
question here, and then I will have to wrap this up. I know it's gone on for so long, and we've taken up so much of your precious time today,
It was
Professor. But there's an interesting question. I thought this is relevant, so I'll ask this. Somebody has asked that your thoughts on Donald Hoffman's interface theory, that we basically, I mean, which is for people, it's speaking more about that, a bit like how you're saying about that our consciousness isn't designed to perceive things as they actually are reality, but it's an interface for maybe what reality. I think that's how what are your thoughts on this theory?
Okay. About human consciousness, yeah, as I said, like I've talked about what consciousness, I mean, things that I want to infer from human consciousness. I think we should have a proper and bigger debate on what human consciousness is, or maybe in a separate section. I would
Sure.
like to leave it at
Yeah.
this moment. And for
Cool.
one specific reason, as I told Mufti, I've written one paper already on human consciousness, and that has been accepted in a, again, peer-reviewed journal. But I want to complete that argument before I comment on it. You see,
Sure.
okay, I also want to make it clear how I work. You see, if I'm making a philosophical argument, if I'm presenting a known fact, if I'm making a
Yeah.
philosophical inference, I'm happy to do that. If I am making a statement for which I need to have scientific, if I'm making a new scientific statement, I will not be irresponsible and make it in public till I have published it in a pre-review, pre-refereed, reputed scientific journal, because that way, that's at least that's said, that is given, and then there's a scientific methodology behind it.
Sure.
So about human consciousness, I would prefer to leave this discussion till at least I complete my present work on human
Sure.
consciousness. I mean, I have
I mean,
published one paper, but hopefully
I
when
mean,
I get
for
that, we will have a
for
discussion.
for what it matters, my perspective on that, from what I've understood of it, is that it's not problematic at all, and makes to me, makes great sense to me in saying that human consciousness, the objective, if objective reality, whatever it is, may not correlate with our perceived reality. Because I don't really see a problem in that in that statement, but maybe there's more to the argument. Right, so right, Professor Shukran, it's been an absolute pleasure having you today on MindTrap. Just really unpacked so much for us. I mean, we've gone through right from uh, quantum gravity to Gödel's kind of theorem, and the issues that kind of and that arise from that, and how we link that into consciousness, and that then moves on into the ground of being, the ultimate consciousness in your, as you've explained, being God, the very fundamental essence of being. At its very, at the ultimate, it doesn't go beyond that, is God. And then moving forward into Revelation, you've kind of spoken Revelation, tying that in, and then explaining also free will, using Heisenberg's uncertainty principle. It's been overwhelming. It's been amazing. I'm really grateful once again. Tahe dil se, inshallah, mashkoor that you've really given us the time, and I do hope, inshallah, we can do this. This is just the beginning of many great interactions to come, inshallah.
I am hoping for that too. It was a pleasure, Mufti, talking to you. I've been following your videos, so for me, the pleasure is.
I'm flattered. Is for our viewers or people who watch this that may have an interest in the areas of physics, or especially quantum physics, quantum gravity, that may wish to reach out to you, connect with you, Professor, what would you? Is there a suitable avenue to take if somebody wishes to reach out to you? What should they do?
Email me. I'm not on any social media. I don't even know how it works, and I don't sometimes have time to
See,
interact on social media.
Professor is
So,
on social media, but in a different universe.
yeah.
In a parallel universe, he's slaying the social media account. But in this universe, he's not on
On
any.
social media. So just email me. I think you can find my email easily. Email me. If you Google my name, you will get my email, and just email
Look at
me.
that.
And
Vah. See, that's Google, yeah. If you need to reach Google. So there you go. People, if you need to reach out, and do look out for those of you that are academics, look out for Professor's kind of writings, his publications in these reputable journals of physics. Shukran once again. People, thank you for really, this has been a well worthwhile, but a very lengthy session. It's been incredibly worth it. But people have really, despite it being quite late in the UK, they're still awake. They're still learning. I love it, guys.
thank you.
Take very good care of yourselves, and you always know where to reach out to me. Social media is the place. Instagram, Facebook.
Yeah.
That's it. I'm gonna bring up the.
That work, so that's why it took me so much of time to reach out to Mufti. I was trying to do that.
You see, after understanding things like quantum, loop, quantum gravity, understanding all these things. The thing that professor was struggling with was, how do I reach out to Mufti Abu Layth despite me being on all social media? It's amazing, isn't it? The universe balancing out. God, I love it, man. People, once again, Professor, much love. And people, take very good care of yourselves. Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh. Here is the page to subscribe to. As always, click the notification bell on YouTube, people. Over and out. Much